All right, well, thank you very much for coming, and we welcome you guys here. Toby, we know who you are. You're the guy from Vineyard, right? Vineyard Wind? Great. Sorry about the last meeting and the weather and everything else that went wrong. So I'll call the meeting to order. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. In the minutes for August 21st, Eleanor does a fantastic job on the minutes. Anyone have any questions? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Motion approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment. Just there's nobody here except Josh. So we will continue on with the agenda. Okay, you guys are up next. So Mike, do you want to kind of be the, head staff person today? You already are anyway. I'm telling you that you are, so you are. Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll just introduce yourselves to everyone and so forth. Nobody knows the drill.
You gotta hold the mic up nice like this.
Yes.
So just real quickly, I'm Tobias. You all know me, but I've known Richard for a number of years over on Martha's Vineyard, doing lots of really great stuff over there for the community. And he reached out to me a couple months ago and said, "Hey, can you help us out on Nantucket? Kind of be our liaison on the island to talk to committees about this possibility of bringing a cable over through the island." And so I've just been helping them out, trying to get through the processes. Richard Andre, he's been on the island talking to the selectmen a number of times, and then Eric Stevens from Vineyard Wind.
Excellent.
Richard's going to kind of run through a presentation.
Welcome.
And
thank you.
Just here to get your feedback.
Yep.
Thanks, Toby. So I think you have copies of the presentation. So this is meant to be kind of informal question and answers. So first I was going to talk a little bit about Vineyard Wind, which is the project that's being developed south of Nantucket, about 14 miles south of Nantucket. As Toby said, we've given the Select Board about 3 updates on the project. But even going before that, I started working with Lauren Sinatra within the town. We met at a federal task force meeting, which is where the federal government comes out and was speaking to not just the Vineyard, but Nantucket and also communities along the whole south coast about this whole process of leasing the ocean for offshore wind development. So there's been an ongoing dialogue with the town. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who's behind the... What's that, Mike?
Is that working for you?
It is, yeah.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to talk a bit about Vineyard Wind, the project company Vineyard Power, who I'm with. Give everybody a little bit of an update on the federal and state processes that have been going on since 2009. So it's kind of been going on to its 8th year. The project itself, I'll mention briefly about visual simulations we're doing. And in fact, the last time I spoke to the Select Board, we spoke about visual simulations, which is going to be like, what's the wind farm going to look like from Nantucket, and what will you see? And we're going to come back and present the results of that in December. And then, as Toby said, the real heart of the discussion with the town and the county, and thank you again for having us, is to just speak about the opportunity to bring a cable to the island. And the sole purpose of that was a town ask, which is to avoid National Grid putting a third cable to the island and trying to offset the cost of that cable. So similarly, you have 2 cables now. If there was a need for a third, there'd be a surcharge that would be charged to the residents of Nantucket in most likely outcomes anyway. So Vineyard Wind is the project company, and it's backed by 2 companies. The first one is CIP, that's Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, and one of the things I like to say in offshore wind, all roads lead to Copenhagen. They're the world leaders in offshore wind. They've been at this for about 20 years, and they produce a lot of their country's electricity from offshore wind. This fund is made up, basically it's backed by pension funds, effectively institutional investors, whether they be teachers and civil servants, mostly in Scandinavia, that are investing in renewable energy projects. And that's not just offshore wind, it's land-based wind, and it's also biomass projects. But it definitely is renewable energy focused. Since they're pension fund investors, they like to invest for the long term. Talking about 20 to 30-year investments. They're not looking to invest in a project and flip the returns. So offshore wind is kind of ideal for that because, as you'll hear from me, these offshore wind projects are something like 30-year projects. So they're kind of well-suited. And they're very economical now. So the money is going into these projects. It's not as if federal subsidies and stuff like that are required. These now are investing lots of capital from investors. I list some of the projects at the bottom there that they've invested in, but they're in Germany, in Scotland, project now in Canada, the project we're speaking about here in Massachusetts. Hello, Matt, by the way. Hi. The other company on the right is Avangrid Renewables. They're part of a Spanish utility company, in fact, the largest Spanish utility company. And that's just another example of how the industry is changing. So when utility companies are getting involved, it's also long-term investments, looking for steady returns over the long term. And I've listed some of the projects that they've done also in the UK, Germany, UK, and France. So once again, it's a very, very much a mature business in Europe, and now they're coming to the United States because the conditions are right here for us. So Vineyard Power, that's the group I represent. We are made up of about a little over 4,000 residents on the vineyard. It says 1,400 members because our membership is defined by electrical meters on the island. So, for example, on Martha's Vineyard, we have about 19,000 electrical meters. We have 16,000 homes and then 3,000 businesses and institutions. So it's about 10% of the island's meters. We were formed effectively for two reasons. One was the Cape Wind project at the time had kind of split our community. Even people that were kind of in favor of renewable energy projects, the Cape Wind project didn't go down well because we thought it was in the wrong place and that the processes were not really transparent. So we wanted to get involved right away in the beginning and get involved with the federal government and talk to them about where are you going to lease offshore wind. You know, is it going to be 3 miles from the shore because that's where the federal water starts, or is it going to be further away? So that was one of the things we got involved in. And then the second is, it was in our interest that if renewable energy was going to be developed around Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard, we wanted to make sure that the developers kind of listened to the community and tried to bring economic development to the community rather than all the development going somewhere else. So whether that be in jobs, infrastructure, maybe even advantageous electrical rates, that would be part of what we were looking to do. And in 2010, literally a year after we were formed, I met Eric Stevens, who's here with us tonight, and they were a big proponent of getting a community involved right away, so learning the lessons from the previous, but also learning lessons from Europe. The most successful projects in Europe are actually engaged with the communities pretty early on. So to talk a little bit about the federal process, when the federal government came out in 2009, this is the map that they showed us, and I got a pointer here. Obviously, there's Nantucket, there's the vineyard, the Nantucket shoals are here. Yep. So this area here is a vast, obviously you can see it's a vast area of ocean. And through this process, I mentioned that's the 3-mile state-federal demarcation. We were successful in convincing the federal government to move the wind farm to about 14 miles from shore. Now, there's always a point where people are saying, why not even further? As you start going further and further out, the difficulty you get is obviously the length to the shore is an issue and transmission of electricity, but also the water depth becomes an issue. You go from about 125 feet of water here, to 200 feet here, and then obviously it drops off. And in fact, you get into the shipping lanes here. These are the main shipping lanes. So we felt, and also stakeholders, meaning selectmen of various towns and state agencies, that 14 miles was a good compromise. Visible, yes, but barely, and only on certain days. So the visual impact is going to be, not zero, but basically zero for most of the year. This whole area here to the right was excluded. In other words, taken off the list, mostly because of, if I said it's long-tailed foraging ducks habitat, was a big concern. This is one of the largest habitats for those ducks in the world. Also, fishing conflicts, very large scalloping grounds. You can tell I'm from New York when I say that. But obviously that was a really big concern. So that was taken off the list. And eventually, after about 4 years, they settled on this area here. That leads me to this. So that area there is now highlighted in the next slide, which is here. This is the old, well, maybe old, the dump that was out there. So that's that kind of here. For the fishermen in the area, this is, fingers and the claw. This is Cox's Ledge, just to give you a little feel for some of the geography. So our site is right here. There's another site here, another site here. These three have been leased. So between 2014 and 2015, the federal government had about a 2-year process of setting out what the auction rules would be, and they eventually held an auction. And what I mean by an auction, it was literally a competitive auction with people in the room raising their hands and bidding. And the winners of these leases bid the highest for the leases, and Vineyard Wind, who we're partnered with here, Vineyard Power, won this area. That area is 150,000 acres, so it's about 3 times the size of Martha's Vineyard, and that might be about, 6 times the size of Nantucket, just to give a sense of the scale of this area. This area was leased by a company called Bay State Wind, and this area here by a company called Deepwater Wind. Deepwater Wind is the company that built the 5 turbines that are off of Block Island right now, and those turbines off of Block Island are in state water. That means they're like 2 miles from shore, not 14 miles from shore. So that's the develop. These 2 areas here are unleased, and the federal government has announced that they're going to hold an auction similar to the auctions they held in 2014 and 2015. They're going to hold those in 2018, and I believe in all likelihood those 2 areas will be leased. So if I was here a year from now, there would be 5 leaseholders most likely as opposed to the 3. I got a question?
Yeah. Did you say how many years those leases were?
Well, the leases are, they're 25 years of commercial operation, but commercial operation means you're starting to produce electricity. So the federal government gives you about 5 years before that to permit the project. And it's important to know the government doesn't allow you to lease it and then sit on it in a speculative fashion. You have to every year report certain progress against milestones to make sure you're developing the lease.
Yep.
So in somewhere between 25 to 30 years is the lease, and they're renewable. You can offer to renew the leases.
Yeah.
And it's important to know that these leases come with a decommissioning fund. The federal government requires you put up the money, and most likely in a bond, surety bond, if you may be familiar with that, to make sure you can decommission the projects if you're no longer operating them, so you can return the site and take the turbines down. That's part of the condition of the lease. So,
What about selling them?
So, yeah, I was going to say this. Everything I've spoken to you now is about the federal process,
Okay.
because you're in federal water. But obviously, anything you do to get your power back has to go into state water and eventually onto the state land. And electrical markets in the United States is controlled by the states. So Eversource and National Grid, which are primarily the 2 regulated utilities. There are 4, but Nantucket Power and Light, it might even qualify for one as a subsidiary. But there's 2 others that are very small. But those 2 make up like 90% of the state's electrical. So Martha's Vineyard happens to be Eversource. You happen to be you're like a National Grid island, no pun intended, in the middle of an Eversource territory, because the whole Cape is Eversource as well. But anyway, the state regulates those utilities and about how much they can charge for transmission and distribution and various things that they do. Well, one of the things the state has done is to require them to buy offshore wind electricity, because they're the only ones that can sign long-term contracts, really, that are financeable. And what I mean by long-term, like 20 years. So what you do when you have a contract from Eversource or National Grid is you go to the bank or banks and then borrow the money to build the projects. So that's what's called project finance. You need the contract in order to get the money from the bank in order to build the wind farm. Or another way to look at it, you need a customer to sell the electricity to. So Governor Charlie Baker, I don't know if my next slide, this will be, I can talk about that now. So Governor Charlie Baker in August of last year signed a bill that requires those 2 utility companies, to buy 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind capacity. So what does that mean? I didn't know what 1,600 megawatts were 2 years ago. 1,600 megawatts is like replacement of 1.5 of Pilgrim nuclear power plants. And by the way, Pilgrim is shutting down, just like Brayton Point, which is the coal-fired power plant in Somerset and Fall River, shut down about 6 months ago. So it's a large electrical power plant, but it's enough to power, close to 1 million homes. So that's how much electricity is. And the state's required the utilities to buy that over a 10-year period. And the first request for proposal is been issued, and the developers, and right now there's 3, as I mentioned earlier, they are going to submit a bid by December 20th, and effectively it'll be a dossier, this thick in documents, but they're only kind of interested in page, 20, which is what's the price. It has to be, it's going to be very price competitive. And then every subsequent bid that comes out, the state's required that the price has to be lower each time, so to keep the pressure on the price on that. So that's what the state is doing as far as that goes. So it's a good site. Highest winds, some of the highest winds on the whole East Coast is coming right up through Nantucket and the Vineyard, especially in the wintertime, but high winds and even good steady breezes in the summer in the evening when we need the electricity the most, when everybody comes home from the beach and puts on their air conditioners and puts the TVs on. So offshore wind also gives that good evening breeze. The site's good. Our site is basically flat, like the continuation of the coastal plain. So it's really ideal for offshore wind development. Now, we only found that out in the last year and a half, because when we've been on the site, you really don't have any idea. You kind of have general ideas. You talk to fishermen and people that have been out there, but we did surveys over the last year and a half, and that's one of the things we talked to the selectmen about. So Matt would have known. We came out and said we were doing surveys, and we just did surveys this whole summer. And the surveys actually came up to Nantucket, and it was in the newspaper announcing that. So that's what I've talked about here. The visualization's underway. I don't have much to say on that. Let me see. So one of the things I mentioned earlier with Lauren and the town is this kind of option that Nantucket, especially the demand in July and August, and especially in the evenings, is exceeding the capacity of one cable. More slides. Yeah, has exceeded the capacity of the cable. So National Grid, sorry. Where are you looking at? No. Sorry about that. So National Grid has been out talking to Nantucket about the need for this extra cable, the third cable. So on Martha's Vineyard, we put in our 4th cable about 2 years ago. And offshore wind wasn't really, the idea of bringing a cable to the vineyard wasn't really on the table. But National Grid is proposed, and in fact, if it came to the vineyard, there'd be a whole different scenario. Eversource would probably socialize that across the whole Commonwealth. You have a very different structure here. But so the whole idea of a third cable's come up, and in speaking with the town, one of the ideas was, and if I go back maybe to this here is a good example. If our project is here, our first choice is to bring a cable right up through Muskegon Channel, and we're going to interconnect somewhere in Yarmouth or Barnstable. And 3 miles inland are 2 substations that have the capacity to handle this electricity. Because when you plug in this, you need to have the right infrastructure. You can't just plug it into, for example, you can't just plug it into Nantucket,
Right.
so to speak.
You can't go to Nantucket and plug it in.
Right. You can't just do it that way. So, and this is also our most direct route. And one would then argue from a developer's point of view, the cheapest route. Another thing to understand is that when you lay an undersea cable is about 3 times cheaper than doing it overland. And in Nantucket's case, it might even be 4 times, because that's trenching roads, putting in duct conduits and duct banks and so forth, as opposed to just laying it. Ideally, the cable's laid something like 6 to 10 feet under the seabed with what they call a jet plow trench, which trenches it and then refills it as it's going. But obviously, if you look, it doesn't take much to think, well, what if we came here, and I'll show you that map later, and then went to the Cape then. So it's more expensive, but it would definitely eliminate the need for National Grid to put that third cable in. And the latest estimates from National Grid, and that's in conversations with them, is that's about a $125 million project. So that's how this whole discussion started, which is there an opportunity for Nantucket to get the third cable, but get it from the
reverse.
the project in reverse?
That's
and
an interesting idea.
And get it there. And
So you're saying you're going to run the power through Nantucket, but it's not really going to Nantucket.
well,
It's going to Nantucket back from the
There's
cable,
more.
from here, from out there. Is that what you're saying?
yes.
Question, Mike.
Oh yeah, good one.
Good, John.
So it's 125 million for a third cable.
That's National Grid's estimate.
That's
Yes.
their estimate. So you're proposing to go through Nantucket, back to the mainland, and then maybe sail back to the vineyard in Nantucket. I guess my question
Yes.
in brief is, how much would it cost for a substation to build on Nantucket so you can go right to the source?
Well, this is, yes, so that's a good question. So the idea would be the cable would come here. I'll show you the idea that's being talked about with DPW and with the various town departments. Go out and go back. And somewhere here, let's say at the landfill, and let me see, this maybe is a better, so, here, up Nantucket Road, across the DPW site, put a substation, continue to Eel Point Road, come up, and then go out Dionis. Now, the need for the substation, at that point, you don't have to do anything. You can just put the cable, and it can run through Nantucket, and there could be some arrangement for that. At the time that is built, or at a later date, a substation can be put in which Nantucket then could get the power directly from the offshore wind farm. And for all intents and purposes, that means you would eliminate the need for a third cable forever, effectively, for as long as that project lives. And you'd be getting renewable clean energy in the process. So it wouldn't come back down. The only time it would come back down the other two cables is if the wind farm shuts down, which could happen in a hurricane. We'd shut it down in big storms and stuff like that.
Well, actually, the cable would always have a connection to the mainland.
Right.
So, like at least a 400 megawatt connection. So, even if the wind wasn't blowing at all, you'd still have a connection that's 10 times as much energy as you would need, even in your peak demand. So, it'd be a high, and we'd actually have two cables most likely. So, the scenario, you'd have extremely high reliability because you wouldn't take out the two cables you have already. What would be the point? And then you'd have the two new ones that could handle, any one of which could handle the entire peak load of the island.
Yeah, because each one of ours are now 35 each.
That's correct. Yep.
So you're talking 400
At least,
Well,
megawatts each?
yeah,
Are they 220 kV?
220 kV.
So as opposed to 35 kV, one of those cables is 220.
Huh.
So as Eric said, you'd be secure.
Yeah, that would last
Forever.
until the island
Yeah.
vanishes.
Now, the issue that we spoke to the selectmen, and Matt maybe remembers, that is, and I mentioned earlier, that is more expensive than just going through Muskegon, but it's not $125 million more expensive. So that's really kind of the sweet spot. So even, for example, if I just argument, if it was $50 million more, it's still $75 million cheaper than the third cable option. That's just to illustrate the point. Coming back to, that's, maybe I'll pause on that, just to pause for a second
Yeah.
before I go on, just to see if there's questions. And we
No,
can talk
I mean,
through,
this is interesting. It's the first I heard of that idea.
Question?
Go
Maybe a
ahead,
dumb
Brett.
question, but electricity can run both ways, right?
Yes,
So we could grab it going or coming.
correct.
And how about, go ahead.
Dump just because it's a available space.
Well, one thing on Nantucket, obviously, in the vineyard, it's expensive land, and also there's lots of conservation. 40% of the island here and on the island and vineyard is conserved. So, one, it's a brownfield site. It's plenty of land, and also if you think about this is so one of the things about laying cable, what the state is going to be looking at is, and especially here and on the vineyard, what are you going to find when you dig a trench? And especially from the National Historic Preservation point of view, and especially with the Wampanoag tribe, and we've been through it, So building up an existing road or bike path
Yeah, it's
is
already-
much better than building or trenching where there is none. So that's
Yeah.
number one. This is a really, Nantucket Road is a lovely straight line road. I mean, you hit the beach and you kind of go up, and the DPW is on the way. So I think that answers kind of the question of why that site. It avoids downtown. The other thing, when National Grid was considering the third cable, and they still are, they were running into a whole issue with the downtown just being congested and not having enough room. And there's all the existing infrastructures there, sewers and water and electric, and so there was kind of already a push to consider, sites outside of the downtown.
Yeah.
So this
The
kind
land.
of the land, and
The land
even the
with the third
road,
cable.
even the road,
Yeah.
through trenching the road.
Yeah.
So we were kind of led to a straight road closest to the wind farm, up, hits the DPW site, and then kind of comes back. This area here is a little bit less, but you got to come back. So those are the kind of considerations. You stay out of the downtown. It's a fairly straight road. It is a road. There's water under Nantucket Road, so there's some utility. There's been discussions of sewer in that opens up a whole nother discussion for the county and the town, because if we're already going to trench it, that may be an opportunity for you guys to revisit things like infrastructure.
Sure, yeah.
Well, Eric might be able to talk.
So, for the time of the actual construction would be sometime 2019, late 2019, 2020.
Mike, one question.
Yes, of course.
You mentioned the usage. We'll have more than we can ever use. Is there any chance that we can sell back? So as we're producing it, bringing it in, we can't sell to the mainland or substation over there?
The developer's going to be doing that. The Vineyard Wind is. Yeah, you want to.
No, I know.
Yeah.
We're building 120. Maybe there's a lease or something.
Yeah, but you have an aggregation on Nantucket, excuse me. You're part of a community choice aggregator. I believe that was a couple of years ago, which means you're buying your own electricity right now for your community. You'll have an opportunity to buy some of this power, on short-term basis, what you can do now. It could be beneficial, and if not anything, it'll be, like you say, 100% renewable. And part of what we're doing, and this is a bit of an aside, but we had a summit a couple of weeks ago in which Rita came, Andrew Vorse had come to it, Tobias was there. Just talking about Nantucket and the Vineyard becoming 100% renewable as we go forward for the generations to come. This would kind of open up opportunities to do that and really make big steps like electric vehicles, electric buses, all the home heating from electric heat pumps and stuff. So there's lots of opportunities, I believe, and including Nantucket would probably have a much more increased reliability and resiliency. I don't know. I don't live here, but from what I heard, that area kind of occasionally, is that right, Tobias?
When we met with Rob at the DPW, he said the dump failed twice this year already.
So you'd improve the whole issue of electricity down here as well, just the reliability of it, so less brownouts or so forth, because they're at the end of the cable now. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is we wouldn't be here if the town doesn't, and the county, yourselves included, don't want this. If this was a bad idea, we'll just, but there's a unique opportunity, and Vineyard Wind is kind of committed to doing community benefit of some type. On Martha's Vineyard, we're looking to put an operations and maintenance facility, which means the boats that are going to be servicing the wind farm are most likely going to be located in Vineyard Haven, so that's a good win for us. And it wasn't long for us to think about what can we, what is there an opportunity for for Nantucket? We don't need the cable on Martha's Vineyard, so that's but there's a need here, so that's what really brought us here. But it's going to take the town, the community, businesses, to say this is a really good idea, or at least it's a good idea to explore. I mean, that's really what we're looking for, because at the end of exploring it, let's say in a year, this is not going to be something we can decide today. We decide it's not the right idea, well, that's fine, but at least we want to have the chance to do it.
Well, as we talk about great ideas, and we've had a lot of them in the town, then all of a sudden it goes right to the heart. How much?
Right.
What is it going to cost the town? What is it going to? So I guess when I was getting into selling back energy, my next follow-up would be with a substation maybe in Nantucket. Is that something that Vineyard Wind will build? And then, or onto our site, would you lease that property back to us, or would we as a town subsidize, build that, and then buy the energy, and then potentially sell back? I mean, what's the option for that?
So the, I mean, as Richard was explaining, the least cost option for us is actually to stay offshore the whole way. There is an incremental cost to do this Nantucket option. And it, as a project developer, keeping in mind that we have to win in a competitive bidding with the lowest cost project, right? As a project developer, we're happy to do this if it's something the town wants, but we can't take on that incremental cost onto our project, because then we probably won't have a competitive bid and it'll all be moot anyway. Nobody will get anything. So what we have to figure out is who would pay that incremental cost. You know, right now National Grid is saying Nantucket will, and that may very well be the final answer. But
What do you mean Nantucket in terms of the rate?
Nantucket ratepayers.
The ratepayers, yeah.
Just like we're paying
first
for the
two.
cables now.
That's right.
And so what we're saying is, if that's going to be the answer, you know, you as Nantucket residents and ratepayers would probably want to find a less expensive option than what National Grid is currently offering, which is that third cable. Now, there's a whole debate, I understand, about whether, in fact, all of National Grid ratepayers should be paying for the cable to Nantucket, which is however Source handles the vineyard. And, you know, we don't really have any standing in that debate. You all do, and you know, it's I guess what we're saying is we're sort of indifferent whether it's socialized across all of National Grid or just Nantucket. But if it's something that Nantucket as a community wants to continue to explore, we're very much open to doing that. We just have to be upfront that it's all kind of a pointless conversation if for us to say, oh, don't worry, we'll pay for it, because we won't win the bid anyway, and we won't be building the project, so we won't be building the cable. So that's sort of the hard reality of it. It's a win-win. It's not a Nantucket free ride, to be perfectly honest. That's. You know, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. But
You are. I'm
yeah.
just more or less looking for, is it going to be more of a partnership where you help us, we help you, and it's a win-win, or is it going to be something that we're going to have to fight out with the town and the people and say that, yeah, we're going to flip the bill, but then we're not going to be really in control, and then they're going to see profits go out. So I'm just trying to look in the future.
What we could say is we could, you know, our thought, and you know, this is the kind of, as Richard said, for right now, for like between now and say December, we have to submit our bid. All we're looking for is to know that Nantucket wants to continue to explore this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, we'll put it in our bid, and we'll just say, you know, this is another option. Our first option will be to go through the Nantucket channel and connect lowest cost, and we'll say as an alternative to that, we'll work with Nantucket, with National Grid for this option. So then, if there is a sentiment to move forward with that, assuming we're selected as a winning bidder, then we would do this part of the development open book. Basically, you know, what it would come down to is we would pay for the offshore work, which is actually about the same distance. The reason it's more expensive to come to Nantucket is because you have to come on the shore, go across the island, go back off the shore. You know, you're doing all this extra work you wouldn't have to otherwise. So we would basically pay for the offshore work, and we'd be looking, you know, to somehow cover the onshore work, and that could be done, you know, sort of as far as we're concerned, open book, and we really want to work with, you know, the Public Works Department or what other agencies figure out like what are all our opportunities for cost sharing. You know, if we're putting in a trench anyway, you know, maybe save some money there. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is that if Nantucket decides they don't want the cable option we're describing here, another option would be, and again we'll put this in the bid, is to put a battery storage at the DP2 at the Public Works site, because that would at least push off the day when you need that third cable. But if you decide you did want to do the cable, we're already committed to the battery Like, why pay for a battery that you don't need? Because I got this cable, so we could put that, and we haven't figured out exactly how much that battery costs, but instead of actually paying for the battery, just put that towards the cost of the cable. So we're not looking for a subsidy from the town in any way, but nor can I say that we're, aside from maybe that the part about the battery, nor can a subsidy go the other way. The project just can't afford to sort of subsidize the solution to Nantucket's problem. We can be part of the problem, but we can't be part of the solution. but we can't.
You got it. That's right.
We can't be paying for the full solution.
Sure.
So, sorry, that's a long about answer.
No, that's good.
But indications are that 125 is a really expensive number. And we wouldn't really be doing the talking if we didn't think it would be something lower than that.
Right.
So, that's real. I think there's something here, but we just don't know yet. But it still could be in the large orders of magnitude.
Did the state DPU tell Eversource to spread it over all their customers, or they took it upon themselves?
I don't know, Eric can talk about this, but I'm not really an expert on this. But the fact that I think Nantucket is still its own power, Nantucket Power and Light Company is still a company. That's where the rub comes. And that's like a kind of a whole fraught legal cases, not just in Massachusetts, but also it's been going on. It happens in Rhode Island. It's just who, the theory is the people who need the investment in that cable are the people who pay for it, not somebody who doesn't need the cable, is kind of the argument from the other side. And precedent tells you that that's the way it tends to fall. It doesn't mean it's going to fall that way in the future, but it would definitely be a case, a legal, there would be it would definitely go to a legal case to prove that point. But right now we do know the precedent is the first cable and the second cable are being paid by Nantucket residents. So the assumption is the third one would, but there is a probability that it might not. But that's a.
Mike, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not the energy specialist, but just a couple of things
None of
caught
us
my
are.
eye. And John's.
Lauren would love to be here. But
She's on vacation,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, we invited her.
I'm sure that's fine. John kind of made a point that kind of interested me. Obviously, you're not going to realize savings through the rate of electricity you're buying. I mean, if this is offshore wind rates, you're probably not going to be saving too much because it's not Nantucket-owned wind farm. But what caught my interest was the connection cable itself and these unleased energy areas.
Yes.
And are you realizing some kind of value, or is it being thought about? I have no idea of utilizing. I mean, those unleased areas, they're going to need to make landfall somehow.
It's a good question. Yeah, good point.
Is this cable sized to accept these new areas, and is there value that can be realized once those get the potential gets realized in these other areas? Once this gets paid for, and Nantucket has done the infrastructure, but these new wind farms come online and use the infrastructure that we paid and put into place, is there value that can be shared or savings that can be,
In other words, is everybody going to be coming to us in another
Well-
10 years with another new idea?
Yeah.
And we'll end up with 1,000 megawatts.
or just for efficiency?
No, that's a very good point.
I think that's what he's asking.
Maybe, Eric, if I have a go at this and you can tell me if I'm wrong. These two projects here, this is all public information. Because interconnection, you have to file a public notice to connect to the grid. They're connecting up through Somerset. So they're going up through Narragansett into, Fall River, Somerset.
So they're going,
That's closer to them.
Makes sense. Obviously.
For us, it's here. Now, okay, you're coming into Yarmouth, let me say West Barnstable or Barnstable Substation. That pretty much taps out the Cape's electrical capacity to accept more offshore wind. So, Mike, the likelihood is that these developers, when they get their heads into it, or might have to go around the Cape into Pilgrim,
That ain't going to happen.
or equally go up this way. So I'm not saying
When you say tap out, you mean the substations?
the substations will have reached capacity, or they would require a massive investment to get them to handle more of electricity. That's the answer. Everything's engineeringly possible, but it would require a massive.
And is that inevitable? This guy seems to know all that stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they're growing like we are, the Cape.
Well,
As far as
yes and no, but they're doing there's a difference between supplying the Cape and exporting thousands of megawatts of offshore wind
Okay.
to the Boston, area where the load
Oh,
is, right?
so it makes
So-
more sense to go to Fall River.
Well,
Because that's-
if you happen to be close there, yeah. I mean, you want to connect at the closest point possible that doesn't trigger what they call system upgrades. So if you go to the map where it shows the substations, it's like the second to last one.
Okay, hold on a second. Do I show substations on that?
They're just in the wrong word. So
Oh, yeah,
you
sorry.
see Barnesville
Okay.
switch substations. So those
Two.
Those two substations are at 345 kV, the highest voltage the New England transmission level has. And that's as far out in the Cape as that transmission, as that voltage level will probably ever go. And so when the engineers do the studies to see, okay, how much offshore wind power could we connect at those substations to get that power to where it's mostly needed in the Boston area, the answer is something about 2,000 megawatts, 1,600 megawatts. We're about there already with the 1,600 megawatts. And even then, if you really are going to do 1,600 megawatts, you have to build a second 345 kV line from that westernmost substation back to
Sandwich,
Canal.
probably. Oh, Canal, yes, Sandwich and Canal, yep,
You know,
up here.
where
Right.
There's a cluster of coal power plants
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Right here,
And
yep.
Pilgrim's not far. So what we're saying is, for someone else to connect in the Cape, assuming that the 1,600 megawatts that we're talking about here is already connected, that would probably be a very expensive way to do it. Because by the time you go to the Cape and then make those upgrades, in the Cape, the land isn't cheap either, right? Make those upgrades to get a new power line. Basically, you have to build a new 345 kV line back to the Boston area, basically, or at least to the Pilgrim area. You're better off just staying in the water, just like we're talking about here.
Right.
It's cheaper to stay in the water if you can avoid going on the land. And have a really long cable. I know it kind of sounds like science fiction or something, but technically it's feasible to go around the Cape and connect right into Boston, or go
Really?
a longer route into the Providence area.
So I think just
Wow, that's
keeping
amazing.
This project, just this Vineyard Winds piece at full build out would be 13% of Massachusetts house savings.
Well, coming back to,
It's a lot of electricity, so that's why it requires so many upgrades.
and I'll make a statement, and Eric can correct me, because I'll come back to Mike's question. If we go straight through here and bypass Nantucket, the likelihood that any one of these projects that get developed sometime in the future come through here and connect here has a lower probability of happening because of what Eric's just said.
So you're basically.
So it's kind of like we're almost saying
I
that
see what's
this is the
happening.
like there's a moment it's going to come, and it's like in the next couple of years with our
So
project.
basically, what you're doing is capturing that amount that's left in those substations.
Yeah, that's right.
That's,
And- yeah.
that's unbelievable.
And there's another way to look at Mike's question. If our project is never built, and these two projects come along, they would have the equal opportunity to come through Nantucket like we're often going to do to you if we don't come.
Okay.
So in an open book, we don't win a bid at the state, and they decide to go build a wind farm somewhere else. If these two developers come here, Lauren and Toby have enough information now, and with my to know that that could be another discussion that comes up, sometime down the road. But you just don't know that you're taking a punt on that,
I just thought you could realize like all this infrastructure work can get paid for by these future leaseholders. That's why I was angling.
Yeah, and there is something about that.
But the other thing to keep in mind is there's a limit to how much power you can carry on a cable anyway.
Yeah.
So it's about 400 megawatts, something like that. That's why we're saying two cables. And you also want to have some redundancy.
Okay.
So it's not like you can put in one really big cable and not have to think about how much ever you need again. You're always going to have to be adding more cables.
Yeah.
And it's also an economic consideration because you don't want to spend the money for a cable that you're not going to use for 20 years
Yeah.
either. Right?
So one of the things we haven't spoken,
In
yeah.
some ways, this is actually an optimized sharing of infrastructure, what we're talking about here.
Okay.
Because, it wouldn't, if some alien was to look down, they would say, why did they build 3 cables on the island and then build these 2 other massive cables that go, 3 miles offshore of the island, so.
The first time they put that third cable down, National Grid puts the third cable down, it's really for like a month of the year, a couple of days in July and
Yeah.
August, and you're like, why do you need a third cable for that? But then, 10 years down the road, then,
not-
so
yeah.
this is, as Eric says, it's kind of an efficient way for the town and potentially the developer to do it. But one maybe last thing I'll just do is, obviously, we haven't spoken about something else. This requires National Grid's cooperation.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
that was something I was thinking.
So
They have to.
that's one of the things with your support and the town, if we follow kind of Eric's idea, which is let's give ourselves a chance to pursue this. They put it in the bid. Then it'd be open book for, let's say, for the next year as we explore this. And it's like, you open up the book. Is it like, how much more is it to come here? And, how does that get shared? But National Grid needs to be part of that. So, and I think, and National Grid will respond to the county and it will respond to the town to say, this is something we'd like you to look at, rather than not,
So the idea
No,
would be,
that's right.
going back to the question about the substation, is we would build the cable, and we would basically build the plug on the cable that goes along the way. And then National Grid would come along and plug in their transformer. There'd basically be a demarcation between our cable that's serving our project and also serving National Grid in its service to Nantucket. And so they would own and build the point from when that, where they basically plug into our cable. And then they have a transformer to bring it down to the island's voltage level. And so they would be responsible for all of that piece of it. And obviously it's connecting into their system, so they need to take that responsibility. So what we're offering is really just sort of the river that they could pull buckets out of.
Yeah.
I guess you could think of it that way.
Can I ask, you guys don't mind, can I ask you one more time now to explain the going through the island to go back to the Cape to come back to Nantucket? Just explain that again, and so that we understand, because when you start talking about us having to pay for it, John brought up the best questions that kind of got us into this nuts and bolts discussion. We're paying for the cable in our bill with all those crazy little, $12 here, $7. I mean, nobody even knows. Nobody looks at that stuff. They just write a check. That's just how it works. But we're paying for stuff forever, I think.
you're paying for the full cost of
I
that
mean-
second cable over 40 years right now. The first
Is it
cable you
40?
paid for
Does
over
it
20
end?
years.
Like
It ends.
all of a sudden,
It does
the
end.
$7
No,
not
it does
on your
end.
bill anymore?
It does end.
Kind of like the Mystic Bridge?
What they're saying, though, is
Didn't happen, by the way.
when it ends, there'll be the third cable, and then you'd be paying for the third cable. And they probably, so they take $125 million and spread it over.
But what I'm saying is we're not seeing it, okay? In this particular arrangement, and I know you don't have a full-fledged, proposal yet, but would it be a taxpayer-paid project versus it's not going to be in your National Grid bill for you guys to put a cable in?
It would be
That's
on the
not gonna
National Grid
happen.
bill. It would be on the national, yes.
For the part that's serving Nantucket.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
They've got to put in a transformer.
But you're doing the work, so that makes the $125 million a lot less. We're back to that again, in that realm of thinking. Okay.
Instead of Nantucket.
So we're getting a discounted cable still through their bill.
That's correct. That's
With
correct.
somebody else doing the work, and then it's just on our bill. So now there's 3 cable. It's like getting a third cable, a different way of getting it.
Yeah, and,
See, that's you got. I'm trying to help you.
That's
'cause
really
this
great.
is
Thank you.
gonna
Thank you.
Get explained.
Thank you.
You've got to say it in our
Yes.
language.
thank you very much.
This is really
You've got to dumb it down.
No, but thank you very much.
nothing's for free.
So, yeah.
That's just something here. But now I see. So we wouldn't be getting something at town meeting, Toby, that we'd have to have appropriation for them to do something. This has nothing to do with that.
And National Grid.
got it.
National
Okay.
Grid would do part of it, and they would do part of it.
Okay.
They would do their section, National Grid would do their
So
section.
instead of a surcharge
And
of
we
X,
say-
it would be X
yeah.
minus something. It would be a lower surcharge.
This is a prefab cable.
Yeah.
And
So-
the other thing might be a town meeting. It would
Different.
be to lease them land out at the dump for a transformer
Yeah.
station.
Right, and we'd go through Concom to
Yeah,
come
that's-
onto the B. We'd have to go through all of the the
permitting
town
stuff, that's
requirements.
something where you could
Yeah.
work with the town.
We'd all do that.
Yeah.
And it's related though, because, if there's some environmental or permitting issue and, this concept that kind of makes this infeasible or really expensive, better to know it now, and we can all kind of go our separate
So,
ways. But-
just to be the devil's advocate, early bird gets the worm, first to the market. What's to stop National Grid from putting in a bid and leasing those other two areas, and then kind of going right to the source and taking it away from you before you even get going?
You mean National Grid building the cable out to there?
No.
Yeah, those other two leased areas, when they come up for bid,
Yeah.
yeah. Are they looking for private industry to front and get going, and then?
Well, I mean, in theory, National Grid that serves at the residential customers is not supposed to be in the business of developing projects.
Oh, yeah.
In theory, by law, they were prohibited to do that, but,
That's sort of the short answer. Eversource, which is in a similar situation, does have an unregulated subsidiary that's teamed up with one of our competitors. So I'll just put that out there.
I see.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But in theory, there's a wall between the two different business units, and so they're not. National Grid that serves the island is not supposed to be talking with the part of National Grid that would develop an offshore wind project.
But if that was to be the case, you now, as informed consumers, would have a big argument to say, if you're part of a project that's south and it's due to a subsidiary that's not a distribution company, you shouldn't charge us $125 million for a cable, right? So you'd be, good negotiating position. So, but anyway, here we are.
Yeah.
So we're going to work with Toby. He'll stay in touch, and but the idea is between now and maybe through November, we're going to be asking the town and through the Board of Selectmen to actually support us putting in the bid an option to pursue this. It's not a commitment on our side; it's just a goodwill option, and it would be to pursue this really good idea that could save ratepayers money on Nantucket. It could include a cable, or it could include storage. Now, storage is not the longer-term solution. It's a little bit shorter term. But still, nonetheless, it'll be a good solution. And as Eric said, it'll be open book. And then we'll see where we are in 12 months or whatever, how long ever it takes. But and it'll give us the time, and it'll also give National Grid time. Now, National Grid, in all fairness to them, this would be new to them, and we've spoken to them about it, and they need time to consider it as well. So it just gives the three parties involved, the town, the utility, and the developer, a chance to see if there's a community benefit for Nantucket.
Are there any community events or forums scheduled to?
So I gave a presentation to the Rotary Club. We had a community meeting here in this room about a month ago. We've been to the 3 selectmen's meetings. We're going to be going back again to the select board. We were open to speak to anywhere to anyone at any time about this. So if you have ideas, we'd be happy to do that. We need, yeah, and I put that at the end of the presentation. It's first of all, Vineyard Wind's got a really useful website. Vineyard Power does as well, and then Toby is actually could be reached, and you just give us a call.
It's interesting. Now,
Mike?
what's going to happen with? Sorry, man.
That's right.
What's going to happen with Cape Wind now? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
back on a different mindset. I'm thinking about those substations being full. This is an interesting little deal.
It is an interesting deal.
So is there a race to get to this substation sort of, there's a little bit room for mustard and
Well,
some
there's a few
tomato
thing-
on
yeah,
this, or what?
Cape Wind is slowly, when you build a project like this, it's about pulling together different pieces,
Yes.
right? And Cape Wind is kind of like all the pieces are falling off slowly. And one of the ones that fell off, I want to say about 8 months ago, or maybe even longer, was their right to interconnect at the same
What are you talking
locations
about?
that we now have a right to interconnect.
So you have that. This is so wild. See, that's never been met. Not that I can remember.
You will
being
not
at
hear
these
that.
meetings.
You will not hear that.
I've never heard this
Yeah.
before.
So
The other
know?
thing that's fallen off for them had an agreement with the town of Yarmouth to actually run the cable through the town of Yarmouth to get to that substation, which is about 6 miles inland from the shore. So the town of Yarmouth, I think 3 months ago or so, sent a letter to Cape Wind saying we consider that agreement void now, and we're now talking about it.
So those are two pieces of the wheel that fell off. The other piece is when Governor Baker signed that law into legislation I mentioned earlier. He specifically said that the only respondents to the RFP or the RFPs are going to be companies that won their lease in a competitive auction, and those 3 developers did. That one did not. So that precludes Cape Wind from submitting a price into the RFP. In addition, the law said that any developer has to be 10 miles from the nearest shore of the Commonwealth, and that project is not 10 miles from shore, and these are. So there's a political and there's lots of things going on there, but to answer your question, I think it's slowly.
It's very interesting. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah, my guess is the selectmen look favorably on it, and the question will be, how do we figure out how to negotiate with National Grid, and how do we figure out how to negotiate with these guys, and what benefit is possible now or in the future, sort of in lower, in better rates or other things, if there is anything at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's sort of, I don't think any single select member knows, and any of us know what, any of this. We know some of it, but we're going to have to get some expertise to help us. So.
Well, my suggestion to you is formulate that nuts and bolts message, because it's pretty simple once you get it figured out. Now I understand what's going on now.
It only took me about half an hour. I should have just did that in 5 seconds.
Wow.
Thanks.
No, you mentioned
good.
you raised a good point about the Cape Wind advocates. If a lot of the components are falling apart, now is the perfect opportunity to capture those proponents, to add them to your side, to create the interest to keep going. Because it's one thing when that falls apart, that doesn't help you, because it looks like, well, there was already one attempt at a windmill and it failed.
Yes.
So you want to kind of keep that ball rolling, gather that support that they had, and then build off of that one.
But keep with it's not all plug and play. That's the key. I mean, when Cape Wind started and all these different things started, it's sort of, no one ever talked about where does this plug in?
Right.
How does
it
that
benefit?
actually work?
What's the
they don't
benefit?
talk about that. Well, now I see what you're doing. This is a totally different animal, and the reason those other ones are going to Fall River makes all kinds of sense. Not just because they're closer, but because they have that's where the power needs to go. I mean, we're just a piddly little plug here. I mean, really, in the big picture. Even though we're using a lot of electricity, it's still a small number.
I've heard it said, as opposed to being on the end of the grid and the pipeline, you'll be at the beginning of it.
It's interesting that what National Grid says is that in terms of growth of load, the rate of growth, Nantucket is the highest.
We're the highest.
Yeah.
And that's why they keep saying third cable.
Yeah.
Not leaving the south.
Eventually. Yeah.
You know how it is, installing gas, switching to mini splits.
Yeah.
like,
They are.
inverters.
The mini split thing has changed everything now.
So it's like, we're going to see more.
It's all on the way.
No way you can
It's
stop it.
more efficient, fix a lot of light bulbs, and that's really good. It's
Yeah.
awesome. But at the same time, we're going to need more electricity.
Yes, that's correct. No, 100%
Yeah.
true.
The last time I was here at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, there was a discussion about going year-round with the bus service on the island, and it was a great discussion. So in Martha's Vineyard, we have the regional VTA, Vineyard Transit Authority, and they've just made a commitment. They're doing a 100% electrical bus fleet, and they're just starting it.
Careful.
They're going to put solar canopies that charges the battery, and that's where they're going. And there's, just to let you know, there's state money involved in this, too.
That's
So it's just another sign of things moving in that direction. So
The other part of your argument, I think you should say, is one of the largest users of energy on the island is the composter.
yeah,
And
good
so
point.
So you're bringing the energy right to one of our biggest users.
Yeah, good point.
So
yeah.
that's why, part of why the substation's there, there's no leakage, there's no, and that thing runs. It's running at night too. They don't close it in the summer when we're busy. It just keeps going.
That's right.
So,
That organic miner you're talking about?
Yep.
The digestion.
Well, thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Thanks again
Is
for
everything
for your
okay?
time.
Does anyone else have anything? Okay. Toby, thanks a lot.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
This is good. This is better than 10 years ago when all this stuff started. This makes sense.
Thank you, Chairman.
Don't forget your stuff with Toby.
Where are we now? Okay. Mike, thank you again very much. Okay, so the Old South Corridor study. So does everybody have this little thing with them? Everybody's got it. Okay. Mike, do you want everyone to open up to the page with the staff recommendations? Do you want to just go right to that, or you want to just give a little
If it's okay, I'd like to
statement?
just skim through some of these
Yeah. Okay.
initial slides.
Okay.
One of the first items in the packet are just conformity with NPDC goals. I thought it was important to see how these recommendations align with a vision that you've already approved through the Regional Transportation Plan. Again, you have a development in the spirit of a town and country development concept. This does focus a lot on infrastructure, obviously, within the town overlay district. But just note that any type of turning lane or widening of the road in the country overlay, Milestone Road, would require a town meeting authorization. So that's some of these, Milestone Road turning lane concepts just aren't necessarily in conformity with number one, our bylaws, because we have a bylaw prohibiting turning lanes in the country overlay, but this is just in the spirit of your goals. Now, multimodal, each one of these improvements should have or does have a component of transit accommodation, bike and pedestrian accommodation. As far as congestion and safety, there's a note on there that rely on methods that maximize public safety and livability. When I go through some of the staff recommendations, I just picked the option that had the most impact on reducing congestion and improving safety. Those were really the driving forces. And if there was another a competing option that didn't necessarily address one of those, that really wasn't scored as well, or just wasn't. I can't recommend that to you because it's just out of conformance with your goals and objectives. And then again, it goes to environmental and historical sensitivity. We did look at having roadways go through the Wannacomet Water Company to increase connectivity. That was one of the missions of this study, is to evaluate connectivity,
should happen?
especially between Old South Road and Milestone Road. Just found that number one, you just didn't have the congestion impact that we thought we may have, which was the point of this exercise, just confirm it and verify it. You just did not have the congestion impact at the rotary that we thought we may get out of a connecting road. And two, we're trying to recommend materials and methods that are typical of Nantucket, not traffic lights, stamped concrete,
Well, can I just
that kind
interrupt
of
you on
thing.
that for a minute, Mike? Can I just interrupt you on that
Sure,
for a minute?
sure.
On the Wannacomet connector, I don't know what you want to call it, whatever, the Old South
South
to
Road to
Milestone.
Okay.
Following the bike path that we have. I mean, that was always Kara had several different options before.
Yeah.
It would be, in my opinion, and I know that they've said no to this now, but yet we do have a bike path,
Yeah.
okay, it would be one way from Old South to Sconset, because you won't want to be pulling out, crossing the road at Old South. It would be the other way around. It would be kind of a one-way sort of road. And I wish we didn't have to just say, nix that as sort of, I think that there's always room to think about that. That makes so much sense to go along that bike path. I just don't understand why that's such a problem. Is it because of vehicles spilling oil, potentially, an accident over the aquifer?
Well,
geez, that's kind
It's
of
not necessarily part of, does the water company even want a road
No
cut through the
trucks,
property
maybe, or
from
something.
Milestone to
I
Old
don't know.
South Road, which they don't. They don't want the road to connect through for those exact same reasons.
Hmm.
But not just that, you just really didn't have the
We don't think it
reduction
would
in
have an
congestion.
impact enough.
Yeah, you just don't get the congestion
Okay.
relief that
All right.
you thought you would get.
Okay,
think
so
would
you
get.
ran some kind of a model.
Well, we paid Beta
or
a lot of money
something.
to
Okay.
do these models. So.
All right, I didn't know that. I don't remember that being said, so.
I didn't necessarily do it myself. But,
Okay, sorry to interrupt them.
but looking at their data just doesn't. It's not just you can't justify it based on congestion relief.
Okay.
As far as other goals like transportation to the mainland, parking management, wayfinding, and telecommunication, I didn't really look at conformity of those goals because they just weren't applicable.
The other issue I think you have with water company and that is the deed and the title.
Right.
and how that was taken by town meeting.
Right.
So I think that would be opening a
Right.
whole nother can of worms, which
Yeah.
it's not worth it
Not
at this
really
point.
ours.
Yeah,
Got it.
might be later, but
Yeah, I understand that.
I did provide in your packet a town and country map just so you can see what the town overlay is. If we do have turning lanes and widenings of the road, you can see the Old South Road is really, in the town overlay, but not the Milestone Road intersections. I did, this is just showing, for illustrative purposes, showing that we did do an evaluation of each one of these projects based on a whole slew of criteria. And I did reduce those down and summarize them into condition, mobility, safety, and sustainability attributes.
Look at the numbers,
And you can
Mike.
see how they score and which projects actually, according to the values and criteria that we establish here, if we did score these things, which projects floated to the top. And you can see that the, 14 was really the higher scores. You can see how the rotary reconfiguration scored the highest, along with the Old South Road Fairgrounds intersection and the Nobedeer Farm Road Milestone intersection. And there was a Pulpus project that scored very high, as well as some of these Old South Road road widenings. Those all scored, based on these criteria, the highest. And you get some lower scoring projects, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not supported. It's just they don't hit on many of the criteria positively that you would think. Some of these are just transit improvement projects or a sidewalk project that don't necessarily have a vehicle mobility benefit or things like this, where they would have right-of-way impacts. So they would score negatively. So that's to give you an idea that we did do analysis of our goals and objectives. We did do some kind of scoring exercise based on our evaluation criteria. And I did show a magnitude of level of service. This map here, I mean, we show you a lot of F, A, B, C, D, E, F on these ways of grading intersections. This is a map of the 2024 build-out. This is with the Richmond development being built, with a 1% annual growth rate over the next 7 years, with the improvements that staff is recommending. This is the benefit that you would see on the network-wide of traffic flows. The rotary, which would be it's in like super failure with the delays from every approach, with reconfiguring that intersection to two-lane approaches, goes to a B level of service with all this build-out and growth. Same with the Fairgrounds Old South Road intersection and the Pulpus intersection improvement, and the Nobedeer Farm Road one. Again, Nobedeer Farm Road, it's in super failure. But with the roundabout reconfiguration, it goes into a level of A, or just it's a completely non-issue. So with these improvements, network-wide, this is what you would end up seeing by 2024 in your traffic impact.
when you guys analyzed that, did you move further? Did you go into, it'd be great we go through the milestone quickly and we get to Stop and Shop, or we get to, in front of Cumbies on, are we going to just drive more quickly into the next bottleneck? Did you study, the next areas?
That probably would be if we did a mid-island traffic study update, for instance. We did do that exercise years ago, and a lot of that data informed this exercise. You would have to look at that, because obviously, you raised some good points. And the split of traffic going up Orange Street to town, eventually you're going to hit the next bottleneck.
Well,
yes.
that's sort of my concern with some of this. Not that I'm against it, because I'm not.
Yeah.
But I think, I think we should be spending, most of the traffic is in the nicest part of the summer. Mm-hmm. We should be spending a lot of our money on alternatives, because, you can't keep accommodating, because there's certain bottlenecks that we're never going to get rid of.
Yeah.
So I just think, during the nice weather, we've got to find a way to get people into the buses and onto their bikes and everything else. And I just think, we have to be careful and be willing to put as much money into those things as we are into this kind of stuff. That's all.
You didn't know, Matt, there's a whole chain of improvement projects going into town, the truck route improvements, those intersections. We're talking about parking improvements in downtown. So those are all happening, I guess, outside of this particular exercise. But, we've been doing our jobs. We're addressing all these different problem areas. It's just we're trying to focus on this particular area and where the one severe key bottleneck is, and that's what this study found, is the rotary. Once you unlock that congestion issue, you really free things up, because it all just snarls right at that one point. So at least least we fix that
I'm gonna
problem.
be betting you a beer if this gets put in, and I'll bet you on a couple other snarls.
I just want to be alive when it's done. That's what I want to be.
Yep.
A means there's not much congestion, or A means a lot of congestion?
A means there's
It means an
less than a
improvement.
10-second wait
Yeah.
at the intersection.
He's good.
Yeah.
Correct. It's more like a 30-second, and F is obviously like a minute or more.
It's got a minute. They're in there.
That's something.
There's no, but there's other bike improvements mixed in with it. Mike, can you explain that?
I think I had a question
Wendy?
from.
Oh, I'm sorry,
An-
Andy, go ahead.
Did they do a projection of how long this fix would be good for before we're back to where we exist? I'm curious. I mean, if you're doing
That's the
projections-
cable guy's question.
Yeah. Well, that's the point of going to a 1% annual growth
Yeah,
rate
yeah.
and going out for 7 years.
That's-
This would say if we do actually have a 1% growth rate,
Yeah.
which is that's pretty aggressive, somewhat. In 7 years, yeah, you could still see these improvements. If we continue going on that 1% track, obviously you see diminishing returns at the rotary. It'd go from a B to a C or a D in say 20 years. But the point is, like 20 years or 15, 10 years from now, we should be doing exercises of do we need to
Right. I was
fix
curious.
those other
They're
intersections.
modeling that. I was curious if they did.
Yeah, so at least from this exercise, in 7 years on a 1% growth rate,
Yeah.
this is the level of service you can expect to experience.
I mean, Nantucket's not going to be China. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if we were talking about all this stuff 30 years ago, we would think that we would have been saturated and in complete gridlock now. We're just trying to unlock the vehicles from just sitting there doing nothing and spread the traffic out. That's really what this stuff does, plus some of the, as Mike was talking about, the other stuff, even Boulevard. Once that's done, I mean, Akawara is like going to Great Point now compared to the Boulevard, but it's going to be, that's going to be a place, people are going to drive that way other than going on Old South, because right now they don't go that way, okay? It's people try to, like the Newtown Road cut through has come up so many times in the last year. It's amazing, and I'm one of them. I drive down Newtown because the roundabout works, except for there's two big, huge bumps in Newtown. But other than that, that's what people are doing. It's interesting. Once other improvements are made, there's going to be new cut-throughs that open up more people to go in different directions. I mean,
Or you
I
keep
don't know what
traffic on
else
your
to
collective
say.
roadway system and off of neighborhood roads.
it's just, first way is going to be
Yeah, I was gonna say,
a little bit
that's
more,
one of the
it's
first way,
spreading out people. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's one of Frank Spriggs' lines he used to tell me all the time, is spread the cars out. And that's kind of what this stuff does.
Tacoma and Lover's Lane.
I mean, but Mike, I mean, some of the stuff that Mike wants to talk about, I didn't mean to hijack.
No, it's,
Mike
I'm just
now.
going to,
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Guess that.
it's been brought up now publicly now a little bit lately. Libby's even brought it up at her little Dan Drake thing. So getting these things done. This stuff has got to get done at some point within the next 10 years,
yeah,
I think.
yeah. And just building on that
Well,
point, just say
that's-
that there's an initial phase that I'm asking that you all consider to be your top priority areas, and that's from the Milestone Rotary to the intersection of Amelia Drive and the chain of improvements that are all recommended along this corridor. That includes a new sidewalk, 8-foot wide sidewalk on the south side of Old South Road, fixes to those three intersections, Amelia Fairgrounds and Milestone, and the widening for turning movement relief in that section between Fairgrounds Road and Amelia Drive. That roadway essentially implementing the design that's approved for the Richmond development. In that section as well, so that would help facilitate left-hand turn movements, which are just nearly impossible sometimes.
So you have the that's what Wendy asked. I want to get her question answered, Mike. You kind of said it really fast. She was asking if the little bike path improvements that we talked about are in all this, and they are, and that's what he
Yeah.
just said.
I was bringing that to Matt's point, which is
It's true. It's just not.
this does help.
It doesn't show it the way this schematic is showing it. You just strictly talk about vehicles in this, but
Yeah.
all that stuff is in, including the one that going to by Ack-I over to Charlie Hughes's is in there as well.
But my point is, I think, if we're making recommendations, I think we should be highly recommending finishing the in-town bike connections. I think that should be a top priority, because if people, we've done a little bit of it, but it's still not all the way there. And if we want people to really use it, it has to be safe
Well,
from the rotary
that's
all the
staying
way
on
to town.
That's staying on the tip, though. This is where we get into the different, how this stuff is going to get
Yeah,
funded.
there's definitely a pipeline, and,
Right.
and and I'm not saying this doesn't happen, but there are situations where just politically we have projects leapfrogging other projects that are kind of in the pipeline for a while. And you're absolutely right. We do have projects already going, like the Bartlett Surfside roundabout. There's the in-town bike path future phases. Just managing the workload, because
We
we
didn't
do
have the
have
Lamp
a
until
new
recently,
docket
so.
of projects that are coming in with this. And how are those managed with the other ones that are already sort of in the pipeline? They do need to be, there are priority intersections, and it's just, that's,
But
and
as
what-
far as the commission goes, as far as this body,
yeah.
the tip, because I tried to answer that question to Dan Drake last week, and I actually didn't really know the full answer.
Yeah.
What is the tip? The tip is dealing with the in-town bike path now, and technically for Bartlett Road, it was kind of in that queue, correct?
The first phase of the in-town bike path was absolutely in the tip. That first phase, Bartlett Surfside is the next tip project. When I say tip, it's the federal state.
So we may
money.
have to capitalize the in-town, to complete it, as Matt is asking.
And that's kind of the idea, as to some phase of that
Okay.
needs to be programmed into the tip. Its design hasn't really initiated too much beyond just conceptual. But the roundabout would be a competing project if that advances at the same pace. And some of these other improvements, the Monomoy, Old South Road, and even Noberdeer Farm Road at Milestone Road, that would be a competing project that needs to be sorted out. I've tried to put some clarity by coordinating off some what I'm calling priority phases and possible tip projects in the table of staff recommendations, to try to make sense of that. There's an evaluation score to each one of these that would help you prioritize these projects if you're considering doing that, if there's a milestone more important. In the evaluation score, the Noberdeer Farm Road and the Milestone Rotary, kind of the same. So
Yes.
but I would
Yeah.
still say that you're going to get diminishing returns from the Noberdeer Farm Road improvement if you don't fix the rotary.
Right.
That almost has to be the key priority, which leads into a column here on this table where I'm getting to staff recommendations. If I could, Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
go through each one of these
Yep.
quickly, and if there's huge disagreement, we should stop and talk about it. But essentially, I'm trying to get direction from this board if you support staff recommendations, so I can take that to other committees, such as the capital program committee, and all the other committees, as well as the Mass DOT, say District 5, to help advance some of these potential federal state aid projects.
Is the Valley Road one the next project up?
Yes.
And when will that be?
Right now, it should be an FY19 tip project, probably 19 and 20, but it's the 21, 22, 23. That's where we have like an array of competing projects. Some have to be federally funded, some have to be locally funded. That's probably the next step of discussions. But just as far as concepts, because we did have Ken Ho and Beta and Tyler Druder, they presented 2 or 3 different options for every intersection. If I could just go through each one of these projects and maybe, Mr. Chairman, you can get a sense of the commission so we can go through this kind of quickly. But
Yep.
I'll start with the Old South Road path, I'm calling. It's the 8-foot wide sidewalk. Recommending that be incorporated as part of any type of roadway improvement, not that it be a standalone project, but that it be done in association with a Milestone Rotary improvement and Fairgrounds Road, Old South Road improvement, that a sidewalk on the south side of that road be part of those intersection improvements. There's a widening of Old South Road for the medians, for instance, and those medians help facilitate the left-hand turning movements coming out of some of the driveways. That 8-foot wide sidewalk would be part of that roadway widening. Right now, we have it listed out as a separate project with a separate dollar figure. I'd like to incorporate that in as just
This is to Amelia?
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. It's to Amelia, not to Young's. That got brought up at a different meeting about the thing. That'll end up being done privately eventually.
Or
In
through
my
some other
opinion.
way.
Yeah.
For the purposes of
Because I think
this, I'd like
Amelia
to
makes the
incorporate
most
it.
sense right now, for
No,
sure.
just-
Yeah.
just-
And eventually that'll be extended probably all the way down to Richmond, probably someday,
That was
but
a
just for,
question that
just
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah. Oh.
We'd like to keep it.
And does that include the little flipper over to Newtown? Because, I mean, that's like, we have
Yes,
the
yeah,
land.
little stub sidewalk.
Have all the
Yeah.
land for this.
Yeah. That's,
Okay.
that's a little stub, so
Okay.
that's part of that.
Good.
Same with the Milestone bike path along the north side of Milestone Road. You recall that there was an idea of having 2 bike paths on both sides of Milestone
Beautiful.
Road. We'd like to do that as part of the Milestone Road reconstruction, any type of Monomoy intersection improvement or the Pulpus improvement, that bike path be incorporated as just part
Yes.
of those projects.
Love it.
Uh,
Does everybody remember that? Some of us weren't. Were you here that meeting? You were? Okay. That was the best idea I've never heard of. Never heard of it. He said, Andrew said it's a 20-year-old idea. I don't remember anything about that, ever.
For drinking something.
you know, just so you know, I do have slides I can go through as reference, but yeah, there's the path on the north side of the road and the path on the south side of the road. The next project is a roadway project at Monomoy. I was recommending option 1. Just it was less conflicts with crosswalks and whatnot. This is the option 1. Option 2 and option 3. You can see option 3 was developed, and that's just more conflicts, more lanes to actually cross. So it just seemed to have the least amount of impact is to go to this option 1 alternative. The next is the Milestone Road at Pulpus Road. And again, I'm going to preface by saying that the project with the most bang for the buck, the one with the most impact to relieving congestion and safety, and that was the roundabout option. And I can switch to that really quick, and that's this option here. That has the most benefit because it's less conflicts with for crossings. It slows down traffic on the Milestone Road, allows more parity between the approaches, and quite honestly, some of these other concepts of teeing up the intersection, making a perpendicular approach, there was really zero benefit to congestion. I mean, the queue along Pulpus Road was always going to be there, and to sink a $500,000, $1 million investment into fixing this intersection, you just really would not see the benefit. The data doesn't show that there's justification for it. The roundabout really had the most bang for the buck. So that's why I recommended that. If there's differences of opinion, I'm happy to change it, and we can have this conversation again, but
Oh, that's good.
Well, the problem I have with it is, this one would get the most, number one, the most negativity to public. Because, and I had a nice half-an-hour conversation with Mike before the meeting. Miles, when you turn left, bail left, not turn left. That's why it works, because you can just go when there's an opening. When there's a car coming from Sconset, you just sort of, you're moving at the, you don't even really stop for the most of the time. And you just go in. It's not really a problem. It's not a safety issue, like nobody found. So, Sconset Road intersection, people are jamming on their brakes in the middle of the road in 2 different directions sometimes, and it's different, okay?
Because they're at speed.
Yeah,
These guys aren't at speed yet.
But you're turning left
Yep.
from Sconset to nobody. It's just like it is at Old South and Fairgrounds. It's the same kind of an intersection, except you're going 45 miles
That's
an hour.
what I'm saying. You're at speed.
It's a totally different thing. So I don't see this. I see getting rid of that little middle thing you do, which I don't even remember how that ever happened to begin with. I don't think that was there forever, was it, Bert? I don't know. Oh, Jack, that little middle thing at
The middle
Island
lane.
Love. Has that always been there?
Right, it has been.
That's crazy. I don't remember that. But anyway, get rid of that and just leave it the way it is. Even Monomoy, in my opinion, doesn't really kind of need
But that's
turning
providing you don't add the bike path on the other side of the road, because as soon as you do
Right.
that, then you eliminate that
Right.
left-hand speed.
That's
Now
right.
everyone's getting hit. So the
Wow.
roundabout kind of looks to the future to incorporate
It does,
everything,
but
including
okay.
the other bike path.
But getting that in that queue
But the roundabout-
in front of all the other ones that we need, like the high school and everything, I'm thinking about what the public's perception is, Jack.
Yeah.
I'd like to have 20 roundabouts. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to just
Putting them all over the.
not be, we're not going to be able to do
prioritize.
that. You know what I'm saying?
Because one of the problems, one of the ideas of the roundabout is it slows traffic
I
going
didn't think they could
to Main
to race.
which makes the main
No,
road work better.
I agree. I see it in Europe. I understand how they work. You don't have to say that. I'm thinking about what's the highest priority, then the next one, then the next one.
Bike path is really a priority.
It's not, Pulpus isn't gonna be seen as the, like, number one thing. It's really not.
Some other things we need.
It's like the Walnut Bike Path. It's just sort of out there, even though it should happen.
That, and I'm hesitant to say I'm from New Jersey, but I've seen too many projects in New Jersey, Route 78, Route 80. The time they spend all of the money to put that third lane in, they need 4. Route 80, the same thing, the time to get. And if
So you're
it's sold out-
saying do
so-
nothing until we do the whole
Not
thing?
necessarily. I'm thinking if we're not going to do anything, that's one approach. Or if
No,
we're
no,
going to
I-
look at that, let's look to the 25-year plan where you get the roundabout, where you're going to think about the other bike path on the other side. So you incorporate all that. So you're not spending, doing a project, then redoing it, doing a project, adding the bike path, then saying it's unsafe for that quick turn, then doing the rotary. I mean, you end up spending 4 times as much unless, if you just don't do it right the first time.
So what about the north bike path, Mike? Obviously, in 20 years ago, that wasn't getting proposed with roundabouts. So we could still build that, because we should do that, so bicycles don't cross over to the Milestone Bike Path to cross back to Pulpus, because that's what they do.
It's so dangerous going your bike along there. It's unbelievable.
You're flipping and flopping all the way out there. It doesn't make any sense. That is a good idea to build that bike path to the
Yeah.
Pulpus
But you
bike
see,
path.
if you build the bike, or if you leave it with the turn, with that quick turn that you like,
Yeah.
and then you build the bike path, then we're going to be changing it to go back to the rotary to make it easier, or roundabout to make it easier for the bike path. But if you build the roundabout first, and then you say, you know what, we can really use this bike path, you're incorporating the bike path into it's already safe to do that. You're not spending money twice.
Here's a question though, John. I'll put it a different way.
Mhm.
If what is this Pulpus at Milestone at Pulpus 2.25? If you had 2.25, would you do Milestone at Pulpus and the staff time it's going to take, or would you say figure out easements to get in-town bike path from the Rotary to town?
Yeah,
Like if you had to choose one or the other, which one do you choose?
I would go with the town first.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say is, we have to sort of look at these, I think, in a prioritization and say
Yeah.
which ones.
Right.
So let's do that
Yeah.
first, and then this could
we're
be.
focusing on this one, and then I'm addressing this one. I'm not saying this should be before the bike path going into town.
But I think what happens is a lot of times, we'll do this, and this will be the hot thing, and off, and that'll be the direction to staff. And then reality, what is there anything else we have to add? We got to add that in. That's all. What if there's other things that are priority.
Okay, so Mike, then so I've gotten blown up, that's fine. So my question to you is, when you put that together as a Capcom, your whole thing with the years and out years, you're going to have to put that in an out year
It'll be put in an out year as a.
with,
But
like we
I
have
think
in the
it's idea.
Transportation
If you're
Improvement
gonna-
Program.
The investment.
because
What
this
option are
stuff
you
is not
investing
in not the
RTP.
yes, the RGTP.
Yeah.
These things aren't even in that. I've never seen them.
An intersection improvement is, and having a teed up
That stuff
approach,
is in there?
That's
Okay.
in the
Okay.
regional transportation
All right.
plan.
Okay.
Uh,
Because I still feel that the north path should go in no matter what we do anyway, but it's okay.
No,
That's
and
fine.
Mr. Chairman, if you like the short-term suggestion of getting rid of the middle.
Yeah, maybe we
I
should
don't
just
even know what
forget
you call
that. Been there since
So the
the
short-term
boat was in New
recommendation,
Bedford,
and then as far as the
evidently.
long-term
So just leave it.
recommendation, you would have option 3 as your long-term.
I would say go with,
Okay.
go with option 3, Mike. That's
Okay.
what they want.
Okay.
That's
I don't
fine.
know if I'm not sure that's what was said. I don't think that's are people. saying
No, I think that what they're saying is we should do it that way and not do a half a fix. Because the little diddly thing, removing that middle thing doesn't really, there could be an old hubcap in the middle of that part, and no one would ever pick it up because no one drives on it. It's just sort of there. I don't even know how it got there.
I've used it.
When you miss the
Right.
first turn, that's when you use it.
when you run him off the road.
So,
Taking
but
a quick
it's a
turn.
Nantucket thing there, Mike. It is.
You're actually better going that way.
Yeah.
To
But-
take a hard right turn.
So is the sense of the
It should be
commission
the
to leave
opposite.
Pulpus alone until the big fix? Is that what you guys
No,
want?
I think you should go for the rotary. It slows the traffic.
Can't believe you're saying that,
No,
Joe.
it slows the traffic
Okay.
down going out to Wisconsin.
No, it's.
Because people get that buildup and they're going 70.
I
So
agree
it's a
with
little
all
bit
that.
road,
I just
and
didn't
again,
think
over
that
here,
it
right?
would be
Same thing.
accepted as easy without other things,
Look, these people are.
you know, because we got so
They
much
should be
other
easily
stuff we
convinced.
haven't done. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking of this as like the 5th one or the 6th one.
Yeah.
You know, we only have one roundabout on Nantucket, everybody. One. We got a lot of pictures, but we only have one.
It's after the, yeah,
It's after the big.
it's after
parade, we're
milestone.
already
Yeah.
saying.
Exactly.
Okay, so this would be in out years.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
talking a
All right.
while.
And
So
I, think
that-
it's good, I also think it's good for the bike path.
Yeah.
It'll be set up better for getting across the street without getting killed.
I actually think there's less congestion here than there is over on the Noberdeer milestone.
Mm.
During the summer, that's backed all the way up past the
Oh,
trading
that's
post.
terrible, yeah.
That's
No, the nobody at Farm one's the worst. I said that already.
High on the list,
That-
besides the main.
That's what but that's not, we haven't started talking about
Right,
that one
well,
yet.
but you're
That's
saying
our next-
It's worse. That's that's the one that's caught my eye during this beta thing.
Well, it's an
I
easier
never even thought of it until that guy said it. And I think it's the best one we haven't talked about so far. You know what I'm
It's
saying?
next up.
So go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about that. As you recall, there was at Noberdeer Farm Road a midterm solution of putting an island in there. I'm not recommending that. I'm recommending just we proceed with the roundabout option that seems to be very, very popular at this.
And cut the
at this
brush.
group. So if there's no objection, I'll include that. Again, this is going to help my conversations with Mass DOT that the NPDC supports these concepts. The milestone reconstruction, I'm putting on here as prioritized as the top priority for federal and state funding of all these improvements. Again, this is the key improvement that's going to unlock all this, the rest of them. Without this improvement, they get diminishing returns on all the rest of the improvements. No objection there. At Fairgrounds, Old South Road, assuming there's still support for this roundabout, with no objection, we'll move on to the Old South Road widenings, Fairgrounds to Amelia. Recommending this be prioritized with the Milestone Rotary as part of a corridor project. I showed that a couple slides earlier. The
So that's the-
Milestone all the way to Amelia Drive, that be advanced as the top
Part of the sidewalk.
section. Yeah,
Thing.
the sidewalk,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
all three
All of it.
intersections be improved. There's a caveat on that. There's a Old South Road at Amelia. There was a number of different options for this intersection, including a mini roundabout. But I'm just recommending that we wait till after this is acquired as a public way and then investigate different design options for Amelia Drive.
Yeah.
If there's consensus
Can I
to
just
hold
ask-
off on making a recommendation for this intersection
Can I ask
until
one
we do
question,
go through the
Mike?
project.
Do
Sure.
we have the layout on the south side of Old South? Do we have land? Do we have to pay for any of that, or we already have a layout there? Because I don't know
We
what
have
the layout
some
of Old
land.
South is, isn't it?
The
not
property
150.
line that's on this map is
Is it?
pretty accurate.
The dotted lines.
Pretty
looks like
accurate.
it
Okay,
works.
so we have enough land to do this without paying
Dotted on
everybody.
the top and the bottom.
Okay.
Well,
No, I'm talking about the sidewalk and the widening of the whole width of the road. That's what Mike's talking about. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about
The right of way.
coming all, yes, that's
Yeah,
what I'm
the
asking.
back of the sidewalk, the property side of the sidewalk will be essentially resting on the property line.
Okay,
So it might need to be a temporary construction easement to get the grades
Okay,
to match, but
okay.
There's no permanent easement. The sidewalk
Okay.
wouldn't be on private property.
okay.
So if you agree with further evaluations being done after that's acquired as a public way, we'll hold off on any particular intersection improvement, and we'll keep that for the conversations with the abutters of Amelia Drive. The next is Young's Way. This is essentially just bike, pedestrian, and transit improvements, really no vehicle. And this is we're suggesting this be implemented as part of the sidewalk improvements in a future year. So obviously, up to Amelia Drive is your priority section, Rotary to Amelia. Anything past that, Young's Way, and there's another section here at Mary Ann Drive, and that end of the airport. That those be future year improvements as recommended. There's really not options here, but as far as prioritization and getting them implemented, that they be less of a priority than the Milestone Rotary end of this corridor. and then the Nobideer Farm Road improvement. Again, this is just extending the bike path to Nobideer Farm Road and adding some crosswalks and sidewalks. Again, mostly just bike pedestrian improvements, and we'll prioritize those again after the priority corridor, Amelia to the Rotary.
We should be, as a town, I know this is not for this board, well, maybe it is, a little bit. Nobody at Farm has a 30-foot layout. It's awful.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times does that come up in your lifetime, Jack? That is insanity. No wonder you can't get anything done on that side of the road. That is awful, Mike. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It's like Bartlett Farm Road, except it isn't Bartlett Farm Road. I mean, you can live with it out there. Well, kind of, Wendy. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of improvements that could happen along there if we could fix that at some point in time. We have to pay them.
From everybody when they come in for their,
Yeah, but it's all developed.
CDs.
It's already developed.
things change. Yeah.
Well,
The school side
is what I'm talking about.
You'd
School
have to go
side's
to
terrible.
on that side. Yeah, you'd have to
No.
go on there.
Right.
The other side's built.
So anyway, so go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
No, that's it. That was the list of projects that we have. I think I got some direction. Well, I did get direction from you on what option to support. So if there's no additional discussion, I'll take those
Spirit of the meeting.
spirit of the meeting to the capital
Yeah.
program and to
Yes.
MassDOT for.
Is everyone good with that?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I'm glad that we've got this Nobody Farm Old South thing though on there, Mike. That's interesting, needless to say. So what do we got? So Mike, do you need any vote for the? No, you don't need any votes, actually.
Get a sense of the meeting.
Yeah.
No, I got direction.
I meant for other stuff.
And this is going to inform the transportation plan,
Yeah.
the TIP, and all the other.
Yep.
So thank you.
Okay. So anything else before we get to Tucker out there in Yimby land?
Someone wakes up.
So Tucker, do you want to? Do you have a presentation on the screen, or do you have a verbal?
I can almost catch that baseball
Sure.
when it starts in a few
Okay.
minutes.
Does everybody remember what Tucker was going to talk about? We might have forgotten. I haven't forgotten though.
All right.
Your trip to where did you go in July?
Yimby Town.
Yimby Town.
In Oakland, California.
Oh. Okay.
So thank you for the opportunity to just give you a brief update on this interesting national conference that was held July 13th to 15th, again in Oakland. Yimby Town is a 3-day gathering for grassroots community organizers, political leaders, educators, housing developers, and everyday people to identify problems, create solutions, share resources on the issues that impact housing on local, state, and national levels. So this year, this is the second YIMBY conference, and there were representatives from a variety of organizations from Cambridge, Mass., Los Angeles, Vancouver, Austin, Sacramento, London, New York, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Portland, Oregon, Santa Cruz, Seattle, San Francisco, of course, and of course Nantucket. There were media in attendance, a number from the San Francisco Bay Area, the New York Times, the Atlantic Magazine, and really this is about creating a movement essentially in support of workforce and affordable housing. We know the issue well here in Nantucket, but it's something that really is affecting communities across the nation. There were a variety of different speakers who really led discussions and gave presentations the first couple of days, and then interestingly, the last day was organized by at the end of the second day, folks giving input on what it is they most wanted to hear about having heard what they did the first couple of days, and so then folks within the 200 or so attendees then led conference sessions on the third day. So it was a very dynamic approach to a conference. Some of the folks that I heard from, and it's interesting just hearing the talk about traffic, a fellow named Lewis Lee, who is a Berkeley PhD, and really his specialty is traffic dynamics, and quite an impressive individual. In fact, I had an opportunity to chat with him a little bit about some of the traffic things here, and he's like, that would make a very interesting case study, Nantucket, given the closed system that we have here. But anyway, there were several other folks who I've made note of here. Laura Lowe, who is the founder of not YIMBY, but YIOBY, yes, in our backyard in Seattle, and was very instrumental in working with an organization there called HALA, which stands for Housing, Affordability, and Livability. And interestingly, Seattle funds its housing efforts through a levy, which they take up every 7 years. And in this past cycle, this last year, this group was able to muster, community will and support for actually doubling the levy to the tune of $290 million in support of again, workforce and affordable housing efforts in that area. Another very interesting and compelling speaker was a fellow by the name of Scott Wiener. He was on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, recently elected as their state senator, and is really leading a number of efforts in California on the housing issue there. And one of the more interesting quotes that I heard during the course of the program was from him, and he basically said, you cannot say you are an environmentalist and not be pro-housing. And what he's really speaking to there is infill and the opportunity to do that. A gentleman by the name of Brent Gaisford, who led the effort against Measure S in L.A., which Measure S had to do with the ability to develop more housing within the city of Los Angeles. Peyton Chung, who was at the Urban Land Institute in Washington D.C. and is kind of a whiz kid, is the best way I could describe him, both from like a data and movement standpoint. Another fellow, Dan Cachette, who is the director of data science for QQ, and he's working on a land value ratio philosophy or approach to evaluating the best locations within municipalities for the development of affordable or workforce housing. And one of the tenets of his work is that building more dense housing doesn't necessarily make it cheaper when demand goes up. What really sort of drives that statement is something I've heard the chair say in the past about Nantucket, is that it's all about the dirt. So just what did I take away? What can we learn for things that we're working on here in Nantucket? Some of the principles that came out of the conference, adequate housing at all income levels supports vibrant communities. A lack of housing is a huge threat to economies and economic development. We must all be storytellers, those who are trying to advance this issue. It takes a sustained effort. Just because you went to one training doesn't mean you've done the work. And a lot of it is about education. I think we've kind of witnessed a little bit of NIMBYism in some recent things that happening here, and listening to some of the concerns that were expressed. There was an awful lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about even a project right here that's been highly publicized many, many, many times and in many public meetings, but there's still misunderstanding. So education is a big piece of trying to advance this issue. And then finally, so Yimby Town is coming closer next year and will be hosted in Boston. And it'll be, I don't think they've set the exact date, but it'll either be at the end of next summer or maybe in the fall. And, hopefully some folks from this group might have an opportunity to attend as well.
What's the average age group at this? Curious.
Young.
I figured that.
Yeah. It's a lot of, probably, there's quite a range, but, I'd guess the average age is probably, mid-30s for the folks who are in attendance. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew you were gonna throw in a little thing about last Thursday's meeting.
Did I say last Thursday?
You didn't say last Thursday, but that's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And one selectman was here.
Yes.
And if there was if all the selectmen were here, if they posted it, because it would have been quite interesting that.
Well, we're gonna hear from them. We've got a letter already, I think.
From them. They is scary. But I know this stuff is coming because I'm used to this, and I hear it, and I talk to locals about this. And I have been trying to formulate something similar to what you were just talking, something you said there about the person that said building more dense housing doesn't make it cheaper. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it makes it possible, though.
Yeah.
There's a difference between cheaper and possible.
Mm-hmm.
There is this housing over here, just like what's across the street from my house, there's 28 houses on less land than I own. Okay?
Yeah.
And they're all us. It's us. It's not they that live there, including the police chief. Okay? And we wanted it, and this is where the economics and the dirt come from as far as Nantucket goes. We wanted this. We established a land bank. Conservation Foundation got all their land for nothing. And the land bank had to buy theirs. It's the same thing, but they had to pay for it. We wanted open space, and I'm glad we have it.
Absolutely.
I am thrilled with that. I'm not against that. I'm not even against LUG 3 in certain areas. But this is what happens when you have a community that people love passionately. And I mean, for all different reasons, they want to come here and they want to be part of it. And we have an economy that is essentially 150% employed. Got to have a place for people to sleep. You just have to have a place for them to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
We have to have a place for summer people to sleep and for year-round people to sleep. It's that simple. I mean, that's what the Caribbean islands do. They have to have a place for everyone to stay, whether you're spending $10,000 a week or earning some of that money. It's both, and that's what we are. And listening to locals get angry about this housing when Tacoma was dirt less than 10 years ago scares me. It was dirt. Those two roads that those subdivisions are on didn't even exist yet. Mishami is the sign still has wet paint on it. So it's. I mean, I'm just saying, and all this old South stuff. I know this isn't what you're here to talk about, but you're bringing up Matt just said it. They're gonna come to the meeting next week, this week rather. Excuse me. Is the zoning was set up for all this when Jack was a young guy. This was put in. RC was everywhere.
Right.
And we're trying to get rid of it.
Right.
If you want to fix housing, we should just put it all back in because it'll happen by itself. It'll happen all by itself.
Yeah, right. But actually, where I disagree,
I'm just saying.
It will have more housing, but unless there's guardrails on the price, unless we put a guardrail on the price, the housing will end up being for the rental properties.
No, but Matt,
But it's not just a supply issue.
But that's part of the desirability factor and the value.
I understand, but it's not. But
unwind that.
But you have to acknowledge that there's a supply issue. You can't solve this solely by increasing supply. And anyone that.
But the apartment answer is a lot better than individual. If there, I brought that up at the meeting, you heard me say it. If there was 64 houses here, there'd be a different story, instead of 64 units in 3 buildings.
Right, but I think to Matt's point, you know, there are guardrails on 80% of this project.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
love the
Yeah.
guardrails. I
Yeah.
I
You
don't
have
know
to
if
do
that's
that.
what Matt's talking
No, that's
about.
what I'm saying. You have
But
to
the
have-
way this is set up,
Yep.
the Stop and Shop can't rent 10 of them or another company. That's good. This is for families and in couples and single people, whatever, to just live just like it's a house.
Right.
Okay? Just like it's a tiny house or a medium house or a bigger house. The
Yeah.
way it's set up, I think it's a great plan. I'm glad they're putting basements. I mean, that took a lot to get them to bend on that,
I can't believe that,
because they're trying to make it cheaper, but that's not the right answer.
that was not good design decision. I
No,
was
but
very
they're not
clear.
realizing that they're making a problem that you can't fix. Now they're fixing it, so that's good.
Right.
You
Right.
can't have people wandering around with laundry baskets through the neighborhood. That's absurd.
No disagreement.
I mean, I can't even believe it. But anyway, Tucker, you've done a lot of work on this Six Fairgrounds / Tacoma, and it's gone unnoticed, and obviously nobody was watching all the Selectmen's meetings because nobody's heard anything about Tacoma Green until last week. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how that happened.
I don't
but-
mind, you know, someone can have a difference of opinion
Yeah.
or look, you know, want to look at something, but it is, it's challenging when facts are sort of, alternative facts are being presented, and that is,
It's change.
yeah,
We put-
yeah. Well, it's NIMBY.
We never had apartments, and there's been a lot
Right.
of push for apartments, and of course, the shy list issue is the key to the apartments, which was brought up a couple times, but I don't know if that's really understood enough.
I don't think it was understood.
It's not understood, is it?
No, not by the.
That's the only way you're going to ever get to 10%.
Yeah,
You could
rental.
build 1 million houses here in 40Bs, and you're not going to get to 10%.
Yeah.
It's got to be done through apartments.
Well, rental is key to doing that. But as well, you know, this is, I mean, I think the developer spoke well for themselves. This is not
They did good.
an off-island
not.
group who's trying to come in and rape a quick buck
That's why
and
I
get
brought up
out.
the Academy Hill thing.
Yeah, I mean, these are long-term players whose references are excellent, and went through a rigorous evaluation process. You know, with you know, a highly qualified group of people to do so, and they got very, very high marks. Yeah.
Yeah, in the beginning of when we did the evaluations, I was not in favor of apartment buildings philosophically. But then when you looked at how much green space was left,
Yeah.
and you looked at, you know, the big monstrosity
You got
it's
a
going
lot
to
of
be
land
next
left here for
to, this
municipal
building,
use.
yeah, this building's going to look small.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the interesting part is we don't. When you start, they came to us this week, and they're adding, you know, 15, 20 parking spaces on site. They wanted another 45 parking spaces set aside for them, plus another lot. So all of a sudden, you start saying, wait a minute, if we're going to have 3 cars per, or 2.5 cars per unit, where are they all going to go? You know, and so it's going to take away.
A new rotary.
Well,
Wow.
no, it's going to take. Hang on, let me finish now. It's
Yeah.
going to take away from if we're going to do that, and we aren't willing to limit them to 1 car per unit or something, and you know, and their friends can still come and visit. If we aren't willing to start thinking like that, we're not going to be able to build out the rest of this property because there's going to be nowhere for them to go. It's going to look like Macy Lane, and so I think that, you know, what people have to start realizing is in Boston and places they're developing and buildings, and they're not having. They don't make them have 10 parking spaces. They don't assume
But-
every single person's going to have 3 vehicles.
But Matt,
Oh, but you have to have, they're gonna have vehicles, yeah.
the problem
I think you
is,
should have assigned parking though.
the problem,
Well, they don't want to
sign,
assign it.
Sign parking.
They don't want to.
I think,
They're gonna have to, I think.
I think though, and this is just, think of it this way, okay, and I'm going to bring up my new favorite thing, the baggage carts and the fast ferries. If every person doesn't have the same amount of stuff, so the more people in these units, you can't say everyone's going to have 2 cars, like the zoning requirement, 2 per bedroom, or 1 per bedroom, whatever the heck the calculation comes out to. So it's not going to be like individual homes with 2 spaces and there's 3 vehicles in every house. This is going to be mixed. There's going to be some people that don't have any car. There might be somebody without a car. No, that's possible in some of the, Joe, there might be some people that don't have a car. You don't think so? There might be a couple.
I'll give you $10 for every one of those.
All right.
No, but my point though is if
Joe, I asked Joe to come to the meeting so we can make sure we had a quorum, and he's giving me a hard time.
no, but my
He never shows up.
Give it to him, Joe, give us a...
But what I'm trying to say, and then you have the Waite Drive issue. I like to see angle parking on Waite Drive. The town has full say in what happens with Waite Drive, which is another issue that was difficult to get that explained. Nobody ever heard of Waite Drive until last Thursday, even though it's been discussed for a while.
We're hoping it's going to have a different name.
It might have a different name by now. It's all worn out by now. But
my
angle
point-
parking allows everyone to not waste space.
Yeah, but
and you're
my
going to get
point-
more cars.
I understood, but my point though, Nat, is that if we're giving the land for free and if we're trying to maximize this use of this
We're
property
getting paid
here,
taxes on this stuff.
understood, but we're not going to make that much tax from these.
But we make
So-
it's not completely free.
Well, if
Okay.
you want to start arguing about the impact and the costs, the taxes aren't going to come close to paying for the kids in school alone. But we won't even go there. So not even close. And so, but we won't go there because we need these, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But I think the point is, if people are going to be getting a break and we're going to get that, in my housing at my place, I make sure I hire kids that don't have cars. I don't have room for 33 cars for my 33 people. And I have a parking lot that holds about 20. We had about 10 cars this summer.
Yeah.
And that's good for my employees, it's good for the people living there, and it's good for the island. And so if we're going to be doing this, the last thing I want to see is 300, let me say 3 times 60, 150, 160 more vehicles here every day. I think that we have the right to say you can have one vehicle. We're building it here because this is in the town district. This is walkable distance to the Stop and Shop. This is
that's
on the
what I was
bus route.
trying to say.
It's on the bus route.
But that's what I was trying to say about it's sort of in the right place for someone not to have a car.
I know, and so instead
I
of
wasn't
hoping
saying
that,
like they're not going to have cars, Joe. I meant you could live here if you didn't have one. Can't live in Tom Nevis without a car.
no, and so I think we should have to find ways to encourage them not to.
Right. That they're going to have at least the
But
cars
what
that are
happens?
employed by
But what happens with us and Tucker? This is sort of half for you, a little bit for Matt. If you were at this meeting the other day and we didn't, let's say that they had the 114 spaces. I believe it's 114, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I knew it was something that was in my head about 114. I guarantee you that everybody that's against us would have had exactly the same things to say. They just wouldn't have been able to say, why are they waiving parking? They would have been able to say, all the cars. In other words, it would have been used in completely the same methodology, just for a different direction.
Right.
Instead of it being there's not enough room for cars, we would have said we have too many cars. You see what I'm saying?
They wouldn't have got my attention.
Yeah, but Joe, but you know
No,
what
I'm
I'm
just
saying.
saying.
But Joe, but you're a practical thinker.
Yeah.
All right, they don't want the people that are against it that are against it no matter what you say.
But they're not-
I'm trying
they're
to
not
say
voting.
that
You know.
I understand that, Joe, but we have to hear these things, and this is,
No, I understand.
we have a lot of land here, and that got brought up, and Andrew, we tried to answer that question, what Charlie was upset about, and I actually agree with his point on the municipal use.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a sort of a bee in my bonnet about some of the land bank property around here that shouldn't kind of be land bank over here across the street from us. We do need to think about municipal use.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Future, when we're gone, there's going to be other stuff.
Mhm.
It has to get built. There'll be a courthouse out here someday, I would imagine. Someday.
Mhm.
Okay, Matt? We won't be here. But something's going to change with the town building. There's going to have to be changes at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see any more housing on this thing other than the lots that are already set up for it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the inside land.
Back
So
here, yeah.
I'd like to see it sort of saved for whatever's coming that we don't know about yet. But this building next door, you know how much land is wasted for 2 fairgrounds because it's in the middle of the whole lot?
Mm-hmm.
All the land is on the front. It's just sitting there with no use at all.
Right.
So reconfiguring that is going to open up like it's almost like we have land we don't even have because it's unusable because the building's in the wrong place, which is typical of Nantucket. So
Well, that was the entrance to the building.
No. I know.
It was the
That was
parking.
the
It was, but that's right. Oh, no. I know that, Jack. I
But
remember
now
that. I'm talking about just in general about the footprint of the $15 million piece of property that we bought. There's more land than we think here, is what I'm saying. That's all. So, but anyway, John had some good points at the other night too. I mean, it's tough to face people that you know all your life upset. You know, because
Sure.
we have to admit who we are. Kids today they're not going to be able to buy a house unless you can give them dirt. Like I can do. I'm very lucky to be able to do that. Very fortunate. And a lot of the people in this room were in that category, some of them. They are very fortunate to have generational land. But that is going to, every year, there's going to be less and less and less generational land available for that next generation. They're going to be glad to have an apartment
But
to live here. That's going to be normal.
That's a good point.
It's going to be normal.
right. I'm sure there are a number of folks who
We're going
might
to have boat storage parking for local families someday, Matt. That we can charge them for or something. I'm serious. There's not going to be a place to put stuff like that for personal use. I'm not talking about commercial.
Correct. Right. No. Well, so I'm sure there are people who might like the downsides, et cetera. But like one of the most salient points that I remember from when the Richmond project was going through the process and neighbors in that community were expressing concerns
Yep.
as they should and are allowed to and are welcomed.
Yep.
But again, to me, it's about like education and understanding. And one of the most salient things I heard was when Andrew basically said, "Hey, like, you know, someone who like may already be or may future be like a friend of yours,
Yeah.
you know, might be living right over here, and that cut through that you're
Yes,
fighting
I knew you
tooth
were
and
gonna bring
nail."
that up.
That you may actually like really wish that was there. It's the same thing over here. I mean,
Yeah.
this proposal, like for Six Fairgrounds, you know, experts. I mean, and I don't use the term lightly. Have said it's as good a proposal as they've seen put forward in any community that they've worked in New England, and. So I think there's a fear of the unknown, you know, from neighbors right in the vicinity, but they may have a good friend or two or three, or their kids may have good friends who live right there, and someday they might actually welcome the fact that, you know, their daughter or son can walk over and play with their, you know, their friend right nearby,
Or borrow some sugar.
or borrow some sugar.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, the cut-through thing, it's funny that you were at those meetings. I don't remember. you
I
being
remember
at
that one.
That was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
The cut-throughs was a huge issue, and it really got sort of like, whoa.
There was one lady who was really.
It's like, this isn't North and South Korea. This is us. I mean, what, we can't just like say hi? Like, I mean,
Right.
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was-
And
it
it was really strange, and that's already subsided. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, it's the change.
Right.
And everybody feels that. I think in any project, we've pulled some letters out of the 1960s. I'm thinking of Jack so much because when he's here, I love Jack being here so much personally. But the 1967 Charlie Davis project, there was like 4 houses out there then, like total, right? And the letters could have all been reprinted and put in any packet that we get today. This is taken away from my vision to the water. This is ruining the neighborhood. The neighborhood. What? The neighborhood out there?
Right.
In 1967, there might have been like 5 houses. Total. And it's like, you're kidding me. I mean, and it was the same stuff. So it's just human nature. It's good. It's okay.
Yep.
But the key core issue is desirability of the island. We're not bringing people here by building a house. That's one of the, I think,
Right.
something that I don't know if you got to go to another YIMBY thing and talk to some of these eggheads, but we're not like out there like this, getting everyone to come here.
No.
Okay? They want to be here. And Bobby said something at a little interview that we did, and I never thought of this until he said it. For every person that gets sick of this place and packs their money suitcase and sells out, 5 people want to come. It's just because the love for Nantucket is a brand new thing for young people in 40 and less. For us, for older people, if you haven't accepted it yet, you're never gonna.
Right.
You want something to go back to the 70s in your mind.
Right.
Or the 80s. I don't know. It's crazy, but that's just how, well, right. I hear you.
Well, and the challenge, like, is when I met with Deputy Chief Gibson the other day to go over
The fence thing
the
and
fence
stuff,
and
yeah.
so forth, but, in the course of the conversation, he said, like, it's not like when he retires that the person who comes to fill his position is going to be in a position to purchase his house.
No. Not.
Right. So
It just isn't going to happen.
we have to provide, some good options.
But I haven't heard anyone say they want their property value to go down to 1985.
Nobody's brought that
I
up to me.
have not had
Yeah.
that said to me yet. Interesting,
Yeah.
isn't it?
You
see what I'm saying?
You have everyone say, "Let me turn my one lot into 2, please."
There's nothing wrong with
at
that.
market rate. That's what you have
But
to
there's
say.
nothing wrong with that, man.
Except that those
Not
houses.
when it's a 2-acre piece
no,
of
but
land.
those houses are not going to the people you're talking about now. If those
All right,
houses
see?
are not, that's that.
See, this is.
You're right.
I
That-
did,
that
but,
is the
but,
issue.
that-
That's
but there
one of the
isn't
issues.
any way to change that, Matt.
Well,
it,
there-
can still go to a local family. Like the one that I sold my land to was local, and he's keeping it.
Yeah,
And but he has the he had
No,
the
but
wherewithal to make it work. But for the most part, no, you're right.
No, but the
But-
demand, if the demand
you
is
can't-
5-1 from outside, and I agree it is,
But you
then what
can't-
we have to come to grips with is how do we run run a bifurcated market? How do we have a secondary market that is capped and limited so that people like the police chief and policemen and everyone else are in the market and are able to stay here? And that's how.
So you're saying
That,
so
that
this
that's
is where we
this
get.
is no this philosophically. I know you and I differ on this,
Yeah,
but this is
well,
where
you never get the support.
Well, I think
That's
you will.
the problem.
You may or you may
If
not.
I'd like to see someone come to a town meeting with a moratorium.
No, but see, I'm not even
article and
saying.
See how that happens.
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about moratorium. That.
Well,
what I'm talking
it's
about
kinda
is
one.
no, it isn't. By saying that we have to figure out how we're gonna, what incentives are we going to put in place to have more permanently affordable
Well,
housing.
the covenant
That's,
program is awesome. I mean, I'm for 2 covenant lots on a lug 2 and lug 3 because there's plenty of land.
and that would
Lug
be great.
2 is 4%
All right, so now-
ground
Make sure
cover.
that it's somebody.
No.
So-
There
so
has
off-
to be a covenant. No. I'm in. That's coming down the road
But see,
eventually.
so on lug 2 and lug 3, but every
Lug
time,
2 and lug
and
3
I would agree with you
on
Except-
land that
hang-
we don't want to change the zoning.
Exactly. So, but
I
no,
would
but then
say
every
that you
but
should
every
do that.
time you turn a lug 3 or a lug 2 into something else, then we've lost that opportunity. That you
No,
just
not-
the incentive you
not
just
when
put
it's
in
in the
place.
sewer district.
The incentive you put in place, you just
Not
lost.
when it's in the sewer district, Matt.
So we're off
We
the
have
topic.
2-acre zoning in the sewer district.
One thing that upsets me about this is, and I hear people tell me, they bought their land in an LUG2 district because they wanted 2 3/4 acres, and they don't like it when you suddenly say some guy next door, now you can build 3 houses there, and you're going to sell the 3 lots off, and you're going to leave and go to the Caribbean.
That's not.
I mean,
exactly how
zoning
it
should
works.
stay the same.
You think so? From 1972?
No, but I mean.
Well, no, but
from
wait a
now-
minute, you have
now,
to ask.
We don't have any more extra land.
No, yes,
So
we
from
do.
that, well, yeah,
We
you
have
gotta
2.
take
We have
conservation
2.
land
We have
back?
2. No, we have 2-acre zoning in the sewer district.
So how we
You got to
doing
look
the-
at the zoning map a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm on
How's the agenda
Well, that's
coming along
the other pressure we're under.
What was that?
How's the agenda coming along here?
Yeah, Joe. I get Joe to come and I'm making him stay. Okay, Mike, are you? Tucker,
Thank you.
Listen,
Yeah.
Tucker. Thank you very much
Do you
for
need
all your
anyone
efforts
wisdom?
that you. Matt, no, seriously, Tucker, you've done a lot, and people don't even know who you are. So I really appreciate
I
it.
like to be under the radar.
Well,
Yeah.
you're doing a good job with what with this housing specialist position. Or
Thank you
whatever
very
it's
much.
called.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. So, does anyone else have anything? Sorry about all that going back and forth. Yes, Jack.
Parking a little while ago. When you talk about diagonal parking.
Yeah.
Diagonal parking takes more room than straight in parking. You get less vehicles.
How do you figure that?
Joe can probably explain it better being a surveyor.
It's math.
No,
Well, you
When you
don't use
angle
much of
the
a
car
backup
in,
lane, right?
the amount of curb space, it takes like 11 feet.
Well,
You
that's
can
true.
get a straight impact, you
yeah,
can get them at
it's
90.
8 feet.
Oh, straight, oh, no, no, no. I thought you meant, no, we're comparing angle to on-street.
It's on street.
I'm sorry,
Okay, I
Jack.
thought-
No, 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 no.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
to
just
go
have
straight
45
in,
feet.
you'd have to have a 40-foot, well, no, 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 it's not enough width.
Angle-
But-
angle
but-
back and take-
But you're also looking at the
I'm
backing
sorry.
up. It's much easier to angle in and then back
Angle
up.
up,
and
back
pull out.
up's
You don't
easier.
need that 23 or
I don't think
24
you need
feet
to-
to back out and then make that K-turn. So you're reducing the width of the road also with the angle
On
parking.
Curb space. it takes-
No, no, that's true, Jack. I thought you, I didn't understand what you were saying. I'm sorry, this little weight drive has come up because of the extra parking.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You're gonna need the back.
yeah, I mean, you know,
You can have a whole nother meeting.
I mean, if you look at Mid-Island though, seriously, and what has changed in Mid-Island compared to, just take Dan's Pharmacy and Cape Cod 5. Dan's got built, we couldn't fix his entrance, couldn't fix anything because that land wasn't fixed, the property that,
Post office.
right. Then once that happened, all these little fixes could happen. I mean, it's going to take 25 years for the Mid-Island to be sort of unwound to be what it should be.
It's come a long way.
No, it has come a
10
long
years.
way. Look at how nice the gas station is in front of there and stuff. We've got Stop and Shop to make some change. We're going to have to get them to make some more.
I think
Pull
we
it.
need
A few things.
also a 5-year breath. We've implemented a lot of things in the last couple of years with the Richmond Group, with the workforce housing, with the single family 107, with the project that we're having on Tacoma now, and that's a town sponsored, so
Yeah.
we're going to see how that goes.
Oh, you're talking about
you know
that.
What? I think there's a lot
Yeah.
in place right now, and we're going to see how it all falls into to place in the
Can
next
I
few
ask
years.
Tucker real quick? Tucker, does a Covenant house count against a shy list? Doesn't, does it?
No.
No, I didn't think
Only units that are 80% and under count
So-
on the shy list, unless it's a rental project, and then if 25% of the total rental project is 80% AMI or under, the whole
Okay.
thing counts.
You already lost me. That's fine. That's good.
But here, I just want to bring up one more point. You know,
Yeah.
at the planning board meeting that we had the other day, there was an entire audience here that was obviously in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
There was one person that stood up that was totally unrelated to the neighborhood. He lived out far and wherever it was.
Flint Road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he had
He was here
spoken.
for something else.
But it's, you know, I think you might have said this earlier, Nat. If this project had been proposed in a different area of the island, this group would still be at home watching the baseball game.
Yeah.
And the other group would be opposed to it. So when you look at it, it was a public meeting. It was, you know, we could have had the entire island here if it was against that. So we're focusing on the
If
one
they got their
group.
abutters notices,
Yeah,
they might have
we're
made the other
focusing
one.
on the one group that's abutting this, and what we have to do is educate, I heard this earlier, about what's so different about this project than the other ones. And I think we're really being thoughtful and how to address a lot of their concerns already. From
I think
from
so.
traffic, from parking, from transportation, all the other things that are around there. Open space, instead of overcrowding with the parking, make it a blacktop. You know, basements that we're putting in there for each
Mike.
of the units for, you know, there's
Mike,
a lot
can
of
I
things.
ask you a question related to what John and Joe were talking
Can I
about?
Can I
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
John,
No,
just
go
quickly?
ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
I think the mistake we made at the meeting, though, not you,
Yeah.
but some of the members started lecturing the people who were against it, and actually got a little mad. That's not the
I
way-
like to
that's not the
lecture
way-
about the old days. I
No,
don't want to
that's fine.
lecture
That's
individually.
That's not the way to bring cooperation.
Well, they have to have
We gotta
a-
get out of that.
People are used to you now. They don't listen
You
anymore.
have-
Come on.
People
they're-
still don't know
You think
that the
they're
boat
listening
was in
now?
Woods Hole once, and that was when everything was free. And it wasn't that long ago. And that's the truth. When the
Right.
boat went to Hyannis is what changed this island. I'm telling you right now, it did. Now, Mike, the shuttle thing is going to start to get a little bit of more publicity with this year-round idea. And now that it's sort of got traction for the Mid-Island loop. I'm just calling it the Mid-Island Loop. I know it's going to Somerset. I'm just saying Mid-Island. That's what I call the Mid-Island. I think that it's going to be helpful with a lot of this stuff. Because that's where the bulk of the people are living year-round. I mean, it's just true. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to notice a change. You're never going to notice anything. I'm talking about some of the stuff that Joe's saying. You know, is this going to eliminate 5 to 10 parking spaces? Is this going to eliminate 5 or 10 cars from not leaving their parking space? That's another thing you don't talk about. There might be a lot of cars over there, but maybe some of them aren't going anywhere. You see what I'm saying? I'm talking about during the day.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm more warm to the Mid-Island Loop than I was 2 years ago when this all got brought up and all the crazy numbers and millions of dollars. You know, I think it makes sense now, and I'm glad that we're, looking at it. So hopefully that'll help.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion to adjourn, yeah. Very funny.
From the guy that was a
Second.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Tucker, thank